Chapter 639. In the drumming tribe. Houses could be seen everywhere. They had a similar architectural style to the drumming tribe, with wooden pillars as the base. However, the wooden pillars here were taller and thicker. The houses were at least 6 to 7 meters above the ground. The taller ones were even more than 10 meters. Also, these houses were not square. Instead, they were round and pointed. The roofs were covered with brown cloth. The bigger houses were more than 20 meters in diameter, while the smaller houses were less than 4 meters in diameter. Below the houses, there were many nets wrapped around the wooden pillars. These nets were divided into many layers, and each layer had something on it. Some were food, some were clothes, etc. Some of the nets below the houses were very complicated. It looked very messy, but it was just a look. There were people resting inside the nets. The ropes and nets could be used as hammocks for people to lie on, and also for drying items. At this moment, in the center of the drumming tribe, in the largest house, the atmosphere was heavy. Is Bo Luo really gone? The person who spoke had messy hair. His clothes were torn in many places, as if they had been scratched by tree branches. There were dried blood stains and a fishy smell on his body. His tired eyes were bloodshot and hazy. The muscles on his face twitched, and the veins on his arms twitched. It was obvious that he was in a very bad mood, as if he was about to explode at any moment. The person sitting by the door replied, "Yes. When I arrived, I saw Bo Luo being taken away by the beasts." The house was silent again. The air seemed to have frozen for a moment. Actually, Bo Luo might still be alive. In the silence, a voice spoke slowly, dispelling the oppressive atmosphere in the house. The person who spoke was a thin middle-aged man sitting in the innermost part of the room. Although he didn't look old, there was a hint of white in his hair. At this time, his white hair and dark brown hair were intertwined, brown and white. It looked like a checkerboard that was squeezed together in rows, and his hair was longer than his shoulders. "My injuries haven't healed yet, so I can't confirm Bo Luo's location. However, I can feel that he is still alive," said the person. "But he was taken away by the beasts. Where can we find him?" The person sitting near the door was troubled. He looked at the person who was surrounded by an oppressive atmosphere. "Bo Gu, what's your decision?" Bo Gu rubbed his red eyes. He had rushed back continuously and was already exhausted. He didn't expect to hear that his son had been taken away by the beasts the moment he returned. He was angry and sad. But there were too many things he had to face now. What to do? He had no idea either. Even if the people who were captured by the beasts were still alive, they probably wouldn't be able to live for long. With a heavy sigh, Bo Gu was about to say something when he heard the gray-haired person sitting at the innermost part of the table say, This shout was not directed at the people in the room, but he had sensed something else. "What's wrong, shaman?" The people in the room looked over. The brown-haired man didn't say anything. Instead, he looked in a certain direction. Although he couldn't see anything due to the cover of the house, the people in the house knew that there was something unusual going on in that direction. Just as they were puzzled, they suddenly heard a series of whining sounds, which sounded like the cries of some kind of water bird. The voice came from afar. If it was someone with poor hearing, it would be difficult for them to hear it. However, everyone in the room could hear the voice. When the people in the room heard the voice, they raised their eyebrows. Their eyes flashed and without saying anything, they rushed out of the room. Bo Gu dashed out of the house that was more than 10 meters high. Before he landed, he hooked his hand and used the net rope tied to the wooden frame to slow down his fall. Zeng! Bo Gu's entire body was like a rock that was falling rapidly. Suddenly, he turned into a leaf and landed lightly on the ground. The sound was like a small pebble landing on the grass. It was so small that it was hard to hear. After landing, Bo Gu and the others who came out of the house ran towards the direction of the sound and disappeared in a blink of an eye. After they left, the brown-haired man who was sitting cross-legged in the room slowly walked out and looked towards the river. He was puzzled. Someone from another tribe? At this time, which tribe did they come from? He could sense that the person was definitely not from a nearby tribe. He also didn't know anyone from a tribe. He had never met anyone from another tribe before. Plus, the person who came gave him a very different feeling. It was very different from the people from other tribes he had met before. As for what exactly was different, he couldn't tell. Not long after, someone rushed back to the tribe from afar. As he ran, he shouted, "Bo Luo is back! Bo Luo, that kid is back!" Hearing the commotion, the people who came out of their houses started shouting. What? Wasn't Bo Luo taken away by a fearsome beast? Bo Luo is still alive? Where is he? Was he bitten by a fearsome beast? I want to go and see. No, don't run around. If you do, I'll beat you up. Stay in your houses. Ignoring the people who were talking, the person who came back ran directly to the biggest house. Using the net rope tied to the wooden frame, he jumped up as if he was stepping on a staircase. Shaman, someone brought Bo Luo back, the person said. Who? The Gu shaman frowned. Bo Gu said it was someone from Yanjiao. Yanjiao? So fast? The Gu shaman was surprised. Bo Gu just came back from Yanjiao's trading point. He didn't even have time to talk about what happened there, but someone from Yanjiao had already come to the Gu tribe's territory. When Xiao Xian sensed that the Gu tribe was getting closer, he let Bo Luo send a signal. Actually, Bo Luo already felt that the scenery on the shore was familiar. He had been here before when he went hunting. However, he knew that they weren't in the tribe's territory yet, so he didn't blow the whistle. Still, his uneasiness was greatly relieved. When Xiao Xian learned how to let Bo Luo blow the whistle, Bo Luo immediately blew a whistle that only the people of the Gu tribe could understand. The whistle was made from two thumbs placed together. Those who didn't know how to make it would have a hard time blowing it. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to produce the same rhythm as the Gu tribe's whistle, let alone use this kind of whistle to send simple messages. Now that Bo Luo saw his tribesmen, his anxious heart finally calmed down. When he saw that his father was among the people on the shore, he was so excited that he wanted to jump onto the shore immediately. However, the Yanjiao's boat was still some distance away from the shore. Even though they were sailing close to the shore, it wasn't good to get too close. The water was shallow and dangerous. Most of the people from the Gu tribe were surprised to see these floating houses for the first time. Bo Gu had seen boats before. At the Flaming River trading point, there weren't only Yanjiao boats, there were also other tribes that went to the trading point via the waterway. That was why when he saw Xiao Xian's boat, Bo Gu didn't have much of a reaction. He was only surprised that Yanjiao had boats coming from downstream and arrived so quickly. There definitely wouldn't be any movement during the rainy season, so these Yanjiao people must have set off after the rainy season. It should be around the same time as when they came back from the trading point. However, they tried their best to get back to the tribe as quickly as possible. Sometimes they didn't even rest at night and half of them were exhausted by the time they got back. Those people were probably still asleep now. If it wasn't for Bo Luo, Bo Gu would be resting at home too. However, these Yanjiao people looked very energetic. Was it because of the boat? Bo Gu was deep in thought when he heard the Yanjiao's boat approaching the shore. He looked over. Bo Luo couldn't wait any longer. He jumped off the boat before it even stopped and ran over excitedly. He had survived a disaster and returned safely to the tribe. He even saw his father return. How could Bo Luo not be happy? However, what greeted Bo Luo was his father's fist. "You're disobedient. I'll teach you a lesson." Bo Gu swung his fist at Bo Luo, who was running over. While Bo Gu was scolding his son, Xiaofan and the rest got off the boat. The Gu tribesmen who came to the shore stared curiously at Xiaofan and the rest. Many of them were cautious and scrutinizing. At this moment, the Gu shaman also came to the shore. "Welcome to the Gu tribe." Xiaofan looked at the Gu shaman, who smiled at them. Why did he feel like he didn't want to come? Chapter 640. Xiaofan's intuition was right. The drumming tribesmen were slightly repulsed by them. As for why they didn't express it, it was probably because they were afraid of the Yanjiao tribe. Even though Xiaofan's group saved Bo Luo, and even though Cha-Cha captured him after saving him, they still saved him. However, the drumming tribesmen were very strange. They seemed to want Xiaofan's group to leave as soon as possible. Xiaofan could understand why they were repulsed by an unfamiliar tribe. Especially a tribe stronger than them, they would be wary of them. However, Xiaofan felt that there was something else going on here. Even so, the drumming tribesmen still welcomed Xiaofan's group to the drumming tribe's resting place. They were guests who had saved the drumming tribesmen before, so they couldn't draw a clear line between them. The drumming tribe didn't want to fall out with the Yanjiao tribe yet. The drumming tribesmen were very cautious towards Xiaofan's group of Yanjiao tribesmen. Bo Gu and the others had been to the Flaming River trading point before, so they knew more about the Yanjiao tribe than the others. They were inexplicably nervous when they saw Xiaofan. The drumming tribesmen mostly wore linen. It looked like it was woven quite well, and the workmanship was exquisite. This was probably made by their own tribe, and it wasn't any worse than the ones made by the Rain tribe. However, their linen clothes were still wrapped with some unrefined, tassel-like hemp fibers. The drumming tribesmen were used to this, so they didn't feel uncomfortable with the hemp fibers tied around their bodies. When Bo Luo was brought to Xiaofan's ship, his clothes were already severely damaged, so the hemp fibers weren't obvious. Now that Xiaofan saw so many drumming tribesmen here, it was obvious that they were wearing a unique outfit. Seeing that Xiaofan was curious about the hemp fibers tied around their bodies, Bo Gu explained, "The drumming tribe is good at making nets. We always bring nets with us when we go out, but sometimes our nets get damaged from hunting, so we use these to repair them." "I see." With Bo Gu's explanation, Xiaofan understood. Different nets had different thicknesses, so the ropes used were also different. Therefore, the people of the drumming tribe brought raw materials with them and used hemp fibers to repair the nets. No wonder the people of the drumming tribe had different kinds of hemp fibers. It must be because they used different materials to make their nets, so they had different kinds of hemp fibers wrapped around their clothes. It could be used for decoration as well as practicality. Xiaofan and the others didn't think much of Bo Gu's attitude, but some of the Ji tribesmen had weird looks on their faces. Logically speaking, Xiaofan and the rest had saved Bo Gu's son, so it was reasonable for them to be polite. However, the people in the Gu tribe who knew Bo Gu were still surprised because Bo Gu was too polite. Who was Bo Gu? The current chief of the drumming tribe. Although the chief's position in the Gu tribe was not as high as the shaman, he was still a chief. It was rare to see Bo Gu take the initiative to introduce or explain things to strangers. In the past, when outsiders came to the Gu tribe to interact with other tribes, Bo Gu would always give them the cold shoulder. However, Bo Gu's attitude was strange today. When they brought Xiaofan and the rest into the tribe, the people who came back to rest with Bo Gu were woken up by the commotion. They ran out to see what was going on. When they saw Xiaofan and the rest, they first looked at Xiaofan and the rest in disbelief. They probably thought that they were still asleep, so they rubbed their faces with their palms. When they looked over, they continued to stare at them with wide eyes. After confirming that it was Xiaofan, they hurried over and glanced at Xiaofan from time to time, sizing him up. "You know me?" Xiaofan suddenly asked. Bo Gu, who was thinking of how to greet the Yinjiao people, was shocked. He looked around and understood what was going on, so he didn't hide it. We just came back from the Flaming River trading point. When we were there, we met Yinjiao's Grand Elder. The Gu shaman in the middle looked at Xiaofan. The other Gu tribesmen didn't seem to understand. They looked at Xiaofan, then at Bo Gu, then at Xiaofan. Grand Elder? This kid? Bo Gu, are you sure? Bo Luo, who was beaten up, couldn't care less about the injuries on his face. What, he's the Grand Elder? The Gu tribe had elders too. Their elders were the same as other tribes. They were either appointed by the previous chief or shaman after they retired, or they were appointed by those who contributed greatly to the tribe. However, this young man, Xiaofan, was also an elder. And the Grand Elder? And the Yinjiao's Grand Elder? They couldn't accept it all at once. No wonder Bo Gu was so polite to this kid. This must be the reason. The others had their own guesses, but Bo Gu and the others who had been to the Flaming River trading point knew that the Yinjiao's Grand Elder had a special status. The Yinjiao tribesmen seemed to respect this young Grand Elder. Plus, when Bo Gu asked around at the trading point, he found out that not only the Yinjiao tribesmen, but many other tribes were also wary of this Grand Elder. When they talked about this Yinjiao's Grand Elder, it was as if they had met a ferocious beast. Xiaofan brought 100 people into the Gu tribe while the other 100 guarded the boats by the river. The Gu tribe had more than 3,000 people. Although this number couldn't be compared to Yinjiao's 20,000 people, it was considered a good number among the smaller tribes. The Gu tribe didn't lack food either. Fresh wild beast meat was enough to fill their stomachs. In order to welcome and thank Xiaofan and the others for saving Bo Luo, the Gu tribe held a feast in the afternoon. It wasn't a feast to show off their wealth, just a normal welcome feast. They roasted meat over a fire and cooked soup in a clay pot. During this time, the Gu shaman even talked to Xiaofan and the others. He mainly asked about Xiaofan and the others' purpose for coming here. When he found out that Xiaofan and the others were just taking a stroll along the Flaming River, the Gu shaman heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't show it on his face, but Xiaofan could feel it. The Gu tribesmen were courteous, but overall, they seemed to want them to leave as soon as possible. The Gu shaman took the initiative to tell Xiaofan about the tribes further downstream. He even mentioned that there was a tribe downstream that produced beautiful beads. This interested the Yinjiao tribesman, especially Duo Li. His eyes lit up when he heard this. What kind of bead? Duo Li asked. The Gu shaman took out a bead the size of a thumbnail from his pocket. Cat's eye stone? Xiaofan was surprised. He took the bead and examined it closely. It didn't look like it was made by humans. It looked more like it was formed naturally. However, these beads looked slightly murky and the eye in the middle was a little dim. This was enough to make Duo Li and the others, who came from the other side of the sea, interested. On the other side of the sea, because the slave masters liked all kinds of beautiful gemstones, these stones that couldn't be made into weapons were often more expensive than grains or animal hides. Seeing that the Yinjiao tribesmen were so interested in these beads, the Gu shaman's smile deepened. After the afternoon meal, the sky darkened. The Gu tribesmen began to head back to their homes. Xiaofan and the others didn't stay in the house the Gu tribe arranged for them. Instead, they returned to the ship. Although it would be more comfortable to stay in a house, the Gu tribe's fire seed was still there. It wasn't as comfortable. That was why they returned to the ship to rest. However, when Xiaofan and the others walked towards the river, the Gu shaman said, "Be careful in the water at night." Chapter 641. The shaman's words alerted the Yinjiao people. The Gu tribesmen had told them that the river was dangerous, that there might be strange fish or something else. Several Gu tribesmen had disappeared from the river before, and there were more and more beasts in the forest. Xiaofan's group would sometimes rest at the bank at night, and they'd encountered some trouble, but it was nothing compared to the beasts in the forest. But this time, Xiaofan didn't dare to be careless. The Gu tribesmen couldn't find the reason for their loss, and they didn't want to die without knowing anything. The night watchers will be on high alert at night, Xiaofan said to them after returning to the boat. After Xiaofan's group left, the Gu tribesmen stopped adding firewood to the fire on the grass, and waited for the fire to go out. Gusts of wind blew, and the firewood in the fire flickered with red light. In the shaman's house, other than the shaman, there were 10 other people. They were all important figures in the Gu tribe, including Bo Gu and the elders of the tribe. There was a glowing water moon stone in the house. For tribes like them who built their houses on the ground, they used glowing stones to light up their houses at night, and not firewood. Using firewood or torches could easily set the house on fire. Other than the water moon stone, there were other stones, but the water moon stone was more commonly used. They traded for it through other people. "Shaman, do you think the Yanjiao people noticed something?" someone asked. "It's better if they noticed, maybe they'll leave immediately." But the Gu tribesman's eyes were closed, and no one could see his expression. "What if they don't leave and stay here for a few more days?" that person asked again. "Then there's no other way. Didn't they say the Yanjiao people are very strong, and can hunt beasts? If they help. How do you know the Yanjiao people will help us? What if they take the opportunity to do something else, or steal our things? What should we do?" an elder asked worriedly. "I don't think so." Bo Gu said, "This trip to the Flaming River trading point has allowed me to see many things that I've never seen before. As for the Yanjiao tribe, I don't think they'll steal our things." "That's just what you think. Who knows if Yanjiao will take advantage of the chaos to rob us, or secretly attack us. Although there are only 200 of them, everyone should know that they aren't easy to deal with. Besides, there's also Yanjiao's Grand Elder." The old man became even more worried. Yanjiao's Great Elder is a bit strange. The shaman of the drumming tribe was confused when he heard them mention the Great Elder of Yanjiao. He always felt that the Great Elder of Yanjiao was different from the others. No, everyone in Yanjiao was different from the tribesmen he had seen. The only difference was that the Great Elder of Yanjiao was different. It doesn't matter if Yanjiao leaves or not. What we need to do now is to prevent more and more beasts from attacking our tribe. Speaking of this, the shaman of the drumming tribe suddenly emitted a murderous aura, like a net full of sharp blades. His sharp eyes looked into the darkness outside the house, as if he wanted to pierce through the darkness and find the hidden figure. The night deepened. Although the moon cast a faint silver glow over the night sky, it was still mostly dark under the forest. The forest was very dense. The trees near the drumming tribe's resting place were taller than their houses. The branches stretched out and blocked the moonlight, casting large shadows on the rounded roofs. The noise in the tribe gradually quieted down. Some people fell asleep while others kept their eyes open, listening to the sounds outside. In the forest, the guards were hidden, almost blending into the night. Even their breath seemed to synchronize with the night breeze. On the boat by the river, the night watchers stared at the surface of the river while the people in the cabin rested. The flaming river's water was swept by the night breeze, crashing against the shore in waves. When the water hit the rocks, it made splashing sounds. The boat swayed slightly on the surface of the river, making creaking sounds. Xiaofan was sleeping with his eyes closed. He suddenly opened his eyes, got off his bed and walked out of the cabin. The night watchers saw Xiaofan come out, so they quickly asked, "Grand Elder, did you notice something? What did you find?" Xiaofan asked. The night watchers looked at each other and thought for a while, then said, "I just feel that something is not right. There was a noise in the forest just now, it should be from the drumming tribe. Maybe a beast fell into the drumming tribe's trap and there was a short fight." But the beast probably ran away and there's no movement now. The river is not calm either. But we can't tell exactly where. The people Xiaofan brought out were all experienced hunters. Their instincts were very sharp. Although they might not be very accurate, they could still sense the general situation. What's wrong? Tuo walked out of the cabin and looked around. He suddenly said, "The river is very quiet." The night watchers said that the river was not calm, but Tuo said that it was very quiet. This was not contradictory. It was because of this silence that it seemed strange. In the past, even at night, there would be fish floating on the surface of the river from time to time. The fish's tail would stir the water and make a sound. Some would even jump and then fall into the water and make a splash. There were also fish that would hunt for insects on the shore and dive into the shallow water to ambush and attack at any time. But now, there was no sound of fish hunting on the shore. There was no movement of fish floating on the surface of the river. There was no sound of fish jumping either. Other than the waves caused by the night wind, there was nothing else. Under this calm appearance, there was something else hidden. Xiaofan glanced around the river and then looked upstream. "You guys stay here. I'll go take a look." As he spoke, Xiaofan jumped off the boat and quietly went upstream along the forest. "I'll go too," Tuo jumped off behind Xiaofan. He did not hear any objections from Xiaofan, so he continued to follow. It was too dangerous for Xiaofan to go alone. If he followed, he could help. If it was completely dark, Tuo's movements would be greatly limited. But now the moonlight was getting brighter and brighter, so Tuo's vision would be less disturbed. This was also why Xiaofan agreed to let Tuo follow. The river bank was still some distance away from the drumming tribe's habitat. The fire seed aura of the drumming tribe here was also very weak. Xiaofan shuttled through the forest on the shore, running and stopping. Under the cover of the rustling of the leaves in the night wind, he approached upstream. Tuo was following behind Xiaofan. Seeing Xiaofan suddenly stop, he hurriedly stopped and gestured to Xiaofan, "Is there a problem?" Xiaofan signaled him to be patient and wait. Tuo held his breath and carefully listened to the movements around him. The next moment, he suddenly felt his scalp go numb. The night wind seemed to have dropped to the freezing point, and a chill rushed up his spine, making him want to shiver. All the blood in his body was screaming that there was danger here. There was the sound of water not far away, as if something was coming out of the river. But when Tuo was thinking about what to do next, that feeling quickly disappeared. The sense of crisis that made his back sweat gradually receded. Tuo then carefully breathed. After the sense of crisis completely disappeared, there was a sudden rustling sound on the shore, as if something was walking on the grass. Tuo stopped wiping his cold sweat and looked at Xiaofan. "Should we do something?" There was no strong sense of crisis, so the sound just now should be from other nocturnal beasts. Tuo did not need to worry about this. But Xiaofan waved his hand and signaled Tuo to continue to wait. The rustling sound disappeared, and the shore was quiet again. Xiaofan moved closer to the riverbank, and then found a suitable place to hide in a tree. He let the branches cover his body, and through the gaps between the branches, he looked at the riverbank where he heard the sound of water just now. Chapter 642. Xiaofan and Tuo kept staring at the river. Tuo Xiang was a little further away from the river than Xiaofan. He knew the shortest distance he could get. If he got any closer, he might expose himself when that thing appeared again. Therefore, he didn't dare to take the risk. After hunting for so many years, he knew where the safe zone was for him to face different kinds of ferocious beasts. He didn't dare to take the risk. Sounds came from the direction of the drumming tribe. It seemed that the drumming tribe's patrols had encountered a ferocious beast, but that didn't draw Xiaofan's attention. He still stared at the river. After about an hour, the area quieted down again with a slight sound of insects. "It's coming." Xiaoxian and Tuodu, who were hiding in the trees, felt their hearts tighten. Every pore on their body was forced to close, not letting out a trace of breath. Even if the wind could hide their scent better, in addition to smell, there were also people's aura and power fluctuations. They knew what kind of danger they were about to face, so they didn't dare to be careless. There was the sound of moving water. It seemed that something in the river was swimming towards the shore. The exposed part of the river had traces of water, reflecting the moonlight. Xiaoxian looked over and saw a strange shape on the surface of the river under the moonlight. For a moment, he couldn't tell what it was. He only knew that it should be a big guy, because behind the exposed part, there were long water ripples on the surface of the river. Perhaps it was the back of the thing in the water that caused the ripples. Xiaoxian estimated that it was about 10 meters long. As for the part that couldn't be seen and didn't have obvious water ripples, Xiaoxian didn't know for the time being. He didn't dare to look over there recklessly. Smart fearsome beasts were very sensitive to sight. Xiaoxian paused and looked over from another angle. This time, Xiaoxian was really shocked. The river and leaves had disappeared. Only the stones and branches showed different shades of gray. The world seemed to have shed its skin, leaving only a faint shape and an obvious skeleton. On the other side, a huge beast skeleton was approaching. How big was it? Xiaoxian couldn't be sure, but judging from its bones, it was more than 20 meters long. Just by looking at its skeleton, it looked like an elongated lizard. However, its neck was much longer than a lizard's, so much so that its head was above the surface of the water while its body was completely underwater. Its thick hind limbs were folded backward, and its body swayed like a crocodile. The bones of its forelimbs were thinner than its hind limbs, and when it swam forward, its head. Xiaoxian looked around. In his field of vision, there was not only the head of the giant beast, but also the bones of an even smaller beast. However, the smaller skeleton was still in the mouth of the giant beast. When the giant beast was about to reach the river, Xiaoxian lowered his gaze and stopped looking in that direction. The next moment, Xiaoxian felt as if a fierce and sharp gaze had swept past him. Although the gaze was invisible, Xiaoxian felt as if an invisible cold blade had brushed past him. That was the giant beast's scan before it reached the river bank. Xiaoxian had averted his gaze in advance to avoid meeting the giant beast's gaze. Once their eyes met, no matter how well Xiaoxian hid, he would not be able to avoid that giant beast's detection. This was Xiaoxian's intuition. That giant beast definitely had that ability. After hunting fearsome beasts for so many years, Xiaoxian rarely had this feeling. That giant beast was undoubtedly a fearsome beast. It came from the forest on the other side of the river, but compared to the fearsome beasts that the Yanjiao hunting team hunted on a daily basis, Xiaoxian felt that this fearsome beast would be even more difficult to deal with. It wasn't that he hadn't hunted larger fearsome beasts before. During the Flaming River Grand Banquet, the beast bones used as decorations, the beast teeth used as decorations, and so on all came from giant beasts. However, Xiaoxian had a feeling that this one would be even more troublesome. If he wasn't careful, he might even lose his life. The two men hiding in the tree didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It was as if they had turned into stone. After that gaze scanned the area and found no abnormalities, it came to the bank. Xiaoxian looked over and saw that the giant beast hadn't come to the bank yet. It had only placed the smaller beast in its mouth on the bank. Because its large body couldn't be completely hidden in the shallow water, Xiaoxian could see its body above the water surface even without his special vision. Its body was covered in patterns like the water plants in the river. The color of its back and belly was different too. Even though its torso wasn't completely exposed, one could tell by looking at its neck. Its dark back with inconspicuous patterns and its lighter belly. This combination of colors was a camouflage for its upper and lower body. It would be harder to spot it when it swam in the river. Its body wasn't smooth and its protruding parts were wet. They reflected the silver moonlight and seemed to carry a metallic chill. Its head wasn't large compared to its body and looked like a slanted shield. There was an elongated hard bone above its head. It looked like a horn but wasn't as distinct as a horn. Although Xiaofan still couldn't see the giant beast's full appearance, based on what he could see and its skeleton, he could deduce that this was a powerful hunting beast. Such a powerful fearsome beast was sneaking around the river bank in the middle of the night. What was it afraid of? Or did it have other motives? It had a mouthful of sharp teeth but it didn't use much force when it held the small beast in its mouth. Xiaofan could tell that it was avoiding hurting the small beast. If that was all, one would think that it was a mother beast carrying its young. However, that wasn't the case. Xiaofan didn't know whether this giant beast was male or female, but he was sure that the small beast in its mouth wasn't of the same species as it. That small beast wasn't a cub either. It was just a smaller beast that was already an adult. It was a ferocious mammal that was over 3 meters long. Xiaofan had hunted one in the forest before. It wasn't a gentle beast. On the contrary, this kind of beast was very cruel and bloodthirsty. The small beast in its mouth didn't move at all. Its limbs were stiff as if it was dead. After the giant beast put it down on the bank, it looked in a direction on the bank. Xiaofan's eyelids twitched. That was the direction of the drumming tribe. Did they have a grudge with the drumming tribe? The river disappeared for less than a year. How did the drumming tribe provoke such a fearsome beast? The giant beast looked in that direction for a long time, then its eyes suddenly swept around. The murderous aura that suddenly burst out was several times stronger than before it reached the bank. The night wind seemed to be disturbed and the leaves in the forest were blown up. There was dead silence all around. Swoosh swoosh, the sound was very soft, but it was particularly prominent in the dead silence. Those with good hearing could hear it immediately. The giant beast withdrew its gaze and looked down at the small beast that was shaking its legs on the bank. The swoosh sound came from the friction between its legs and the grass when it was shaking. Splash, without looking at the bank again, the giant beast dived into the water and left. The sound of the waves wasn't loud and couldn't be compared to the sound of the wind pushing the waves against the bank. When it left, the giant beast dived into the water because it didn't need to carry anything in its mouth anymore. The long ripples on the surface of the water became shallow and disappeared directly. The oppressive silence dissipated. In the grass, the sound of insects sounded tentatively, intermittently and cautiously. The bank returned to its original state. The small beast that was lying on the grass turned over and rushed into the forest like the wind, for fear of losing its life if it was too slow. Chapter 643. When Xiaofan and Tuo returned to the boat, they were carrying the small beast that the giant beast had brought over. It wanted to escape from the giant beast's mouth, but it was killed by Xiaofan. "Brother Xian, you went out to hunt at night?" Guang, Duoli, and the others had woken up. For some reason, they couldn't sleep that night and felt uneasy. When they came out and heard that Xiaofan and Tuo had gone out to investigate, they didn't go back to the cabin to sleep but waited outside. "You brought this back just to eat?" "I'm hungry, hee. Duoli's hee was halfway through when he stared at the beast that Xiaofan had thrown over as if someone was strangling his throat. The night watchers also came over and saw the teeth marks on the beast's body. Although the giant beast didn't bite the beast directly, it had brought it over from the other side of the river, so it was inevitable that there would be teeth marks left on the beast. The Yanjiao people were all too familiar with beasts, so even if the teeth marks weren't deep, they could roughly guess. Kun too reached out and gestured at the shallow marks on the beast. "It's a big guy. I'm curious why this small one wasn't hurt." "I'm curious too." Tuo exhaled deeply, as if expelling all the tension from his lungs. Kuan Tu glanced at Tuo and pointed at his mouth in confusion. "What's wrong with you?" Tuo raised his hand and wiped his mouth. There were still traces of blood. The corner of his mouth twitched. "I was scared." When the giant beast looked at him before it left, Tuo tried his best to stay calm. All the hair on his body stood on end, and he clenched his teeth so hard that his gums bled. However, because his mouth was tightly shut, the blood didn't flow out. It only flowed out after he relaxed. As soon as the giant beast left, the closed pores all over his body opened as his body relaxed. In just a few breaths, Tuo was covered in a layer of sweat. His back was still wet. "I was scared to death." Tuo told them what he had seen. He didn't see as clearly as Xiaofan, but he could still roughly describe the situation. "Brother Xian, what do we do with this one?" Guang gestured at the beast with his knife. "Do we eat it?" "No, let's keep it. I'll bring it to the drumming tribe tomorrow to talk to them." Xiaofan said. "What do you want to talk to them about? Don't they want us to leave as soon as possible?" Duo Li was reluctant. He was interested in the beautiful beads that the shaman of the drumming tribe had mentioned, but he also noticed that the shaman of the drumming tribe was trying to drive him away. "I want to know too, how did the drumming tribe in such a big way?" Xiaofan couldn't figure it out. Moreover, the people of the drumming tribe didn't seem to want their help. They didn't even want others to know about this. That night, the atmosphere by the river was very strange. Although Xiaofan and Tuo had already left, they knew that the giant beast was still moving. It didn't stop moving the beads. It wasn't until dawn that the tense atmosphere relaxed. Fish started swimming around the river. The beast that Xiaofan killed did not know how to swim, and the giant beasts had brought them here for other reasons. The drumming tribe must have known the answer to that. The next day, Xiaofan only brought a dozen people to the drumming tribe. They carried the beast they killed last night. "Is your chief here? I need to talk to him." Xiaofan asked the people guarding outside the drumming tribe. The other party didn't expect the Yinjiao people to come again. They didn't dare to delay. The Yinjiao tribe was bigger than theirs. After reporting to the tribe, the other party came back and brought Xiaoxian's group to Bogu's house. The beast Xiaoxian was carrying attracted a lot of attention. Although to Xiaoxian's group, it was just a small prey, but in this place where even fearsome beasts were hard to come by, this beast was already very eye-catching. They had never seen such a beast before, not to mention how easily Xiaoxian carried it. It was as if he wasn't carrying a 3-meter-long beast, but a small piece of clothing. The rumors of the Yinjiao people being strong were true. Some people thought to themselves. Bogu frowned when he saw the beast Xiaoxian was carrying. However, he still spoke politely. "Were you all okay last night? Where did you hunt this beast?" "I hunted it last night." Xiaoxian threw the beast on his shoulder in front of Bogu and didn't say much. A few people who were close to Bogu came over and squatted on the ground. They used their hands to touch the beast that had been dead for a long time. They looked at each other and didn't say anything. They wanted to ask Xiaoxian something but didn't know what to say. Bogu closed his eyes and seemed to be thinking about how to reply. When he looked up again, he said to Xiaoxian, "There have been more fearsome beasts around here recently. It's better for the Yinjiao people to leave quickly. We hunt more fearsome beasts in Yinjiao than we eat grains." Xiaoxian looked at the people from the drumming tribe. Seeing that they still didn't want to say anything, he didn't force them. "Okay, since you said so, we won't stay any longer. This beast is for you all." Xiaoxian told the others to leave the drumming tribe. Before Duoli left, he looked back at the people from the drumming tribe. He said to Xiaoxian, "They want to hunt fearsome beasts. We have a lot of experience. Why didn't they ask us for some advice?" Then, Duoli asked, "Are we leaving now?" "Why?" Do you have any ideas? Xiao Xian glanced at Duo Li. Hey, I'm just curious. How will they deal with this? Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, maybe they'll make a move soon. It'll be a big one. Really? Why don't we stay for a few more days and see how they deal with this big problem? I still don't know how other tribes hunt. Duo Li's eyes lit up. He was even more excited than when he saw a gem. It wasn't just Duo Li. The other people from Yanjiao were curious too. Watching others hunt was an effective way to learn more about them. Sometimes, it was even more convenient than fighting them directly. They really wanted to know how the drumming tribe fought. They didn't have much strength. Did they just rely on nets and stone tools? While the Yanjiao people were discussing if they should stay and watch the show, Bo Gu looked at the beast on the ground with a gloomy face. He raised his hand and signaled for everyone to disperse. Then, he walked to the wooden frame under his house. The net wrapped around the frame blocked the view from the outside. Bo Gu walked to the center of the frame and stomped on it 3 times. It seemed like a casual stomp, but every time he stomped on it, a wave of air would spread outwards, causing the grass on the ground to sway. After 3 stomps, Bo Gu stood there and waited. When he felt the force under his feet, he took a step back. Where Bo Gu was standing, a thick round wooden cover opened. There was a layer of soil on top of the cover. There was grass growing on the soil. There was a hole in the ground. When the thick wooden lid opened, a man came out. His face was full of stubble and his nose was protruding. He didn't come out directly but instead leaned against the edge of the hole. He looked up and narrowed his eyes at Bo Gu, then yawned. What's the matter? Is it safe underground? Bo Gu asked. The person impatiently smacked his lips, of course. If it's not safe, why would I sleep here? It's just too noisy at night. You guys are making too much noise. The person spoke quickly and his voice was sharp. If someone wasn't familiar with him, they wouldn't be able to hear what he was saying. But Bo Gu was already used to their way of speaking. He could hear every word clearly. Bo Gu didn't mind his complaints and only said, as long as it's safe. Then, he turned to leave. The person saw this and was about to go back to sleep when he thought of something. He poked his head out and quickly asked, I heard there are Yanjiao people coming to your tribe? Yes. Bo Gu's expression was indifferent as if he didn't want to say more. But the person didn't seem to notice Bo Gu's expression and continued to ask. I haven't seen Yanjiao people before. I heard they look like fearsome beasts. Is that true? Do they have fangs, claws and a long tail? The person squinted his eyes and asked again. None. Nothing special. I don't believe you. Are they still here? I want to take a peek. Nope. They left. The person's face was full of pity. He then asked, why didn't you ask the Yanjiao people for help? I heard the Yanjiao people are good at hunting fearsome beasts. If you ask the Yanjiao people for help, it will be easier. This is our tribe's business. There's no need for the Yanjiao to interfere. Bo Gu said expressionlessly. Oh, since it's your tribe's business, then we won't interfere. Then, the person didn't wait for Bo Gu's response and closed the hole. The ground returned to its original state. There were only a few traces of the hole being opened. Bo Gu took a deep breath and raised his leg. He wanted to stomp on the hole and collapse it. Let's see how the people below can sleep peacefully. But Bo Gu controlled himself and sighed. He walked towards the shaman's house. Chapter 644. Xiao Xian and the rest didn't stay at the Gu tribe for long. It was obvious that the Gu tribe was on guard against them. Grand Elder, are we really leaving like this? Kun Tu looked back at the Gu tribe after boarding the boat. He wanted to see what the Gu tribe was going to do next. There's no point in us staying here. The Gu tribe won't make a move because of us. Xiaofan gestured to the people behind him to get ready to depart. Plus, I feel like the Gu tribe is preparing for something big. Something big? What big operation? Duo Li and the rest who were whispering turned to look at Xiaofan. How would I know? Xiaofan said and continued to work on the map. The sails were raised and the two boats on the shore creaked as they left the shore and continued down the flaming river. Although the boats left, the people on the boats were distracted and kept looking in the direction of the Gu tribe. Their understanding of the drumming tribe was limited, and they knew that there were many things they hadn't seen yet. Especially when they heard Xiaofan say that the drumming tribe would soon take action, they were all itching to speak. They wanted to go back and see what the drumming tribe would do, but they didn't dare to say it out loud. Sigh. Duo Li scratched his head and went to sleep. It was his turn to keep watch tonight. After the two Yanjiao boats left, a few figures came back from the forest. Yanjiao left? Bo Gu asked the person who just came back. Yes, they left. I saw them leave with my own eyes before I came back, said the person who just came back. If that's the case, we should make a move too. Bo Gu's face was filled with determination. Since he decided not to let Yanjiao interfere, there was no need to regret it now. Tell everyone to get ready. Bo Gu walked towards the shaman's house and told him that Yanjiao had left. The shaman closed the door to his house after Bo Gu told him about Yanjiao's movements. He was the only one left in the house. The Gu tribe's fire seed was very close to his house. He could see the fire pit burning from the window. Facing the direction of the fire pit, the Gu shaman sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes. He raised his hand and accurately reached into a wooden tray that had been prepared beforehand. He dipped his right thumb into the viscous black paint and dropped it onto a piece of linen cloth in front of him. The linen cloth wasn't big, only about half a meter square. After the shaman touched the cloth, he started to draw a simple abstract shape on the cloth. As the drawing was completed, it could be seen that the Gu witch had drawn a standing figure on the linen cloth. The figure had both arms outstretched, with one arm raised and the other hanging down slightly, as if he was about to throw something. And next to the person was a net. After drawing the pattern, the Gu shaman did not retract his hand. Instead, he placed his thumb in the middle of the net and closed his eyes. After a while, the Gu shaman retracted his finger, opened his eyes and stared at the direction of the fire pit. After a while, he retracted his gaze and walked to a room in the house. That was where the ancestral records were kept. Different from the animal skin scrolls used by other tribes, the Gu tribe used cloth to record things. They used their own techniques to weave cloth with unique patterns. The cloth was processed, from the material to the crafting, it was different from the usual cloth. Even after thousands of years, it still retained its original softness. The shaman didn't look at anything else. Instead, he walked to a short table. There was a scroll on the table. He found this scroll when Bo Gu left and would look at it every day. Opening the scroll, the shaman looked at the drawing on it and sighed. In this part of the scroll, there was an abstract drawing of a giant beast and some people pulling a net to hunt. For it to be recorded and passed down to the future generations, there must be a great meaning behind it. The hunt recorded must be a great one. If Xiaofan was here, he would definitely notice that the giant beast drawn on the scroll was very similar to the giant beast he saw at the riverbank that night. Even if it was just an abstract drawing without any painting skills, as long as he saw it, he would associate it with the giant beast he saw that night. But this scroll was left behind by the Gu tribe's ancestors 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago, before the disaster, before the river was formed, the land of the fearsome beasts was connected to this place. The Gu shaman sighed again and closed the scroll. The moment the scroll was completely closed, all of the Gu shaman's emotions and worries turned into a resolute killing intent. It's been 1,000 years, it's time to end this. Xiao Xian was very confused when he saw the giant beast at the river bank. He didn't know how the Gu tribe provoked such a fearsome beast. After all, the river only disappeared after the disaster last year. Even if the flaming river couldn't stop all the fearsome beasts, it shouldn't have attracted such a strong beast that lived deep in the forest. Moreover, this ferocious beast deliberately created trouble for the drumming tribe by transporting the ferocious carnivorous beasts that could not swim across the river one by one. It was a strong and cunning fearsome beast, but it was overly cautious. The truth was, this grudge was formed 1,000 years ago. Before the disaster, the two sides of the flaming river were connected. The tribes living here often came into contact with fearsome beasts. The scroll that the Gu shaman took out recorded the hunt that took place 1,000 years ago. Back then, the ancestors of the Gu tribe had their eyes on the fearsome beast and set up a hunting net to hunt it down. Unfortunately, the beast left in the end. Not long after, the disaster of heaven and earth arrived. A huge crack appeared, and the dangerous river and the giant beasts that had never existed here before appeared one after another, cutting off the giant beasts on the other side of the river. All the tribes on this side of the river ushered in a new life with almost no ferocious beasts for nearly 1,000 years. This was because the ferocious beasts on this side of the river were hunted down one after another, but no more ferocious beasts crossed the river to this side. Now, the barrier was broken and the fearsome beast that bore a grudge for 1,000 years appeared again. 1,000 years had passed. The ancestors of the drumming tribe who hunted the beast had long passed away, but the giant beast was still alive. It was even stronger and smarter. It was also a beast that could grow endlessly. As long as it was alive, it could continue to grow. Now, it still remembered that its claws were chopped off and came back for revenge. Why was it so cautious? Even if it was much stronger than before, it was still cautious. Even after 1,000 years, it would still instinctively feel fear when it sensed the aura of the Gu tribe's fire seed. After all, it was almost caught by the ancestors of the Gu tribe and even had half of its claws chopped off. Not everyone in the Gu tribe knew about this secret. Only a few knew because they didn't want to cause panic. After all, they hadn't encountered fearsome beasts for many years. The Gu shaman was worried that this would cause panic in the tribe. The fearsome beast wouldn't make any big moves in a short period of time, so the Gu shaman decided to wait for Bo Gu's return. At that time, Bo Gu was on his way back from the Flaming River trading point, so Bo Luo naturally didn't know the truth. If Bo Gu was in the tribe at that time, even if he didn't tell his son everything, he would have hinted at him and stopped him from going to the river. When Bo Gu returned, some of the core members of the tribe also knew the truth. However, from today onwards, the Gu shaman would tell every Gu tribe member about the fearsome beast's origins. As for why he didn't let Yanjiao interfere, it was because the Gu shaman felt that this was the Gu tribe's own business. This involved the ancestors of the Gu tribe, so it was their responsibility to complete the unfinished task left behind by their ancestors. The person who left behind that note was the Gu shaman of that generation. After he drew the scroll, he left behind a sentence at the end: if you encounter it, kill it. Back then, the shaman of the Gu tribe probably felt that the fearsome beast was a threat to their tribe. Unfortunately, the disaster brought about a natural barrier in front of them and stopped them from completely solving the problem. Knock knock knock. Someone knocked on the door, pulling the shaman back from his thoughts. From this rhythm and strength, the shaman knew who it was. Even if he didn't hear the voice, he knew who it was. He could sense every Gu tribesman. There was a reason why shamans were so important in the Gu tribe. Come in. The murderous intent in the shaman's eyes faded as he walked out of the room calmly. It was the chief of the Gu tribe, Bo Gu. He knew that the shaman should have made his decision by now. Before every hunt, the shaman would perform a divination to decide if and when to hunt. Sometimes, he would even decide which beasts to hunt and how to hunt. Bo Gu was here to find out the answer to the shaman's divination. "Shaman, how is it?" Bo Gu asked. 3 days later. The answer was concise. "Understood. I will send those who can't participate away in 2 days." Chapter 645. The drumming tribe had made a big move this time. They were about to face a battle that had been delayed for 1,000 years. It was bound to affect everyone in the tribe. In order to prevent the weaker ones from getting hurt, Bo Gu went to make arrangements after leaving the shaman's house. Their core battlefield was where their tribe was located. The drumming tribe was one of the few tribes that used their own place as their battlefield. If they wanted to evacuate everyone who couldn't participate in the battle, they would have to evacuate everyone from their tribe's territory. Bo Gu's plan was to let those people leave through the Ya tribe's underground cave and then find a place to hide. The Ya people weren't strong in battle, but they were good at finding a place to hide. Bo Gu had seen the person who came out of the ground under his house before. The Ya tribe wouldn't participate in the battle, but they would help the drumming tribe send the people away. Hence, in the next 2 days, there were many pregnant women and children carrying bags going into the cave under Bo Gu's house. They would leave through the cave and the Ya tribesmen would lead the way for them. In these 2 days, there were more fearsome beasts in the area, especially those patrolling at night. They could even hear the clear sound of waves coming from the river bank. Now that the beast was no longer hiding, the drumming tribesmen wouldn't go near the river bank. They would only guard the borders of the tribe and hunt down the beasts that intruded. On the 3rd day, the drumming tribe was very quiet. There weren't any children playing around and no one was running around. When the sun was high up in the sky, the shaman walked out of his house and walked towards the fire pit. The other drumming tribesmen also came out of their houses and gathered around the fire pit. Before the hunt began, they had an important ceremony. To the drumming tribe, the net was a tool and also a religion. Perhaps people from other tribes didn't think much of a net, but every time before and after a hunt, the drumming tribe would hold a special ceremony. Just like the Flaming Horn tribe's mobilization meeting before a hunt, there would be a sword cleansing ceremony after the hunt. The drumming tribe did the same. The more important the hunt, the more complicated the ceremony was. To many tribes, they only needed people, tools and strength to hunt. But the drumming tribe thought that it was more than that. For them, there was one more important and necessary procedure before a major hunt, a ceremony. Without that ceremony, the people of the drumming tribe would feel that no matter how powerful you were, no matter how skillful your hunting skills were, and no matter how sharp your tools were, without a ceremony, there wouldn't be a satisfying hunt, and they wouldn't be able to achieve their goals. That ritual would bestow power to the hunting net in their hands. This power would allow them to hunt with satisfactory results. They would not miss their targets, they would capture enough prey, and all their tools would achieve the greatest effect. When it came to rituals, they would naturally mention the shaman. The shaman was the host of the ritual. All important rituals of the tribe were inseparable from the shaman. The shaman was the most important person of the ritual. Without the shaman, the ritual would not exist. The hunting net could not be given power, and the hunting operation would end miserably. It could be said that in the eyes of the drumming tribe, hunting was a witchcraft operation. The witchcraft would decide the time and method of hunting. The drumming tribe's main hunting method was net hunting. The shaman played a crucial role in net hunting, which was why the shaman of the drumming tribe had a high status, while the chief's status was far lower than the shaman's. They could do without a chief for every important operation, but they definitely couldn't do without the shaman. When the Gu shaman came to the fire pit, Bo Gu and the others were already there. Inside the fire pit, there was a pile of hunting nets that filled the fire pit. The nets piled up like a small hill, blocking the fire seed from the fire pit. They didn't burn because of the fire seed in the fire pit. If you looked closely, you would notice that the nets piled up in the fire pit were different from the ones the drumming tribe usually used. This was because the beast they were about to hunt was much stronger than the ones they usually hunted. Ordinary straw nets couldn't stop the beast's footsteps at all, let alone kill it. Therefore, they used the best nets they could make this time. Every year, they would gather raw materials for this kind of net during the appropriate seasons and store the hemp fibers. When it was needed, they would take out these precious materials to weave the highest-level hunting net. Are you ready? The shaman shifted his gaze from the fire pit to Bo-gu and the others. Yes. Bo-gu looked at the people gathered. These were all the participants of this operation, a total of 1,300 people. More than half of them would be in charge of the outer perimeter. Most of them were beginner totemic warriors, while the other half would be in charge of the inner perimeter. Most of them were intermediate totemic warriors, while the experienced ones would be in charge of the inner perimeter. If that's the case, the Gu shaman's face turned serious. Cast the nets. Everyone lined up in a long line. This wasn't the first time they did something like this, so they didn't need to say much. Bo-gu, who was the first on the left, walked towards the fire pit. He stopped in front of the fire pit and stretched out his hand. The Gu shaman took out a long and thin leaf. The leaf was thin and brittle, as if it would break if touched. The Gu used 3 fingers to pinch the leaf, and with a wave of his hand, the withered leaf was like a thin, sharp knife, slicing through Bo-gu's palm. Blood followed the path of the leaf and slid down Bo-gu's hand into the fire pit. The whole process took less than a breath's time. Bo-gu stepped to the side and the second person stepped forward. Just like Bo-gu, he stretched out his hand. Everyone who participated in the battle would drip their blood into the fire pit. Even though there were 1,000 people here, it didn't take long. When the last person finished, it only took half an hour. When everyone was done, the Gu shaman flicked his finger and threw the leaf into the fire pit, sticking it on top of the hunting net that had been piled up into a small mountain. What was the meaning of the net? Subdue. Conquer. As the ceremony continued, this thought seemed to have spread out along with the net. Inside and around the Gu tribe, there were waves of restlessness. The birds that used to fly here had long left. The insects that hid behind the leaves had already spread their wings and flew away. The other reason why the Gu tribe didn't want the Yanjiao to interfere was because if the net was activated, the Yanjiao wouldn't be able to do anything. In fact, they might even leave the net. In the flaming river, the calm waves churned as if something was stirring vigorously below and was about to burst out of the water. Chapter 646. When the ceremony was over, the sun was still high up in the sky, its scorching rays shining down on the ground. The people of the drumming tribe were already covered in a layer of dense sweat, but they didn't even have the mood to wipe it off. They silently followed the tasks assigned to them and went to different places. Once the mission started, they would chase with spears, draw bows and arrows, use ropes and lassos. Everything would go according to plan. They were nervous. This would be the first time in 1,000 years that their tribe faced a beast of that level head-on. When everyone was in position, the Gu shaman stood alone by the fire pit and picked up an object. It was a hard, round object made of dense hemp fibers. It was about the size of a palm and as thick as a knuckle. This object was connected to a long handle and the Gu shaman held it in his hand. He raised his arm and pointed the object in the direction of the flaming river. He moved it slowly until he reached a certain spot. The Gu shaman paused and looked in that direction. His gaze was like a sharp knife, piercing through the forest and shooting towards the flaming river. The Gu shaman maintained his position and did not move. The net that was piled up in the fire pit behind him had already been taken away. There was only a small flame in the empty fire pit, like a flower blooming in the middle of a flower bed. Whoosh, the flame flickered. Then, there was the sound of waves crashing against the shore from the flaming river. The sound of water splashing against the forest could be heard too. It's here. The Gu shaman tightened his grip on the handle again. He was nervous too, but as a shaman, he couldn't panic. He had to stay calm. The reason why he decided to make a move today was because he predicted that today would be the best day to make a move. The weather was fine and there was no rain, so it wouldn't interfere with their movements. The air humidity was just right, neither too humid nor too dry. This would allow the soldiers to maintain their best condition. Most importantly, the success rate of attacking on this day was the highest. As the saying goes, the right time, the right place, and the right people were all indispensable. The beast wouldn't come out during the day. Even if it didn't want to wait any longer, it would choose to attack at night. However, the Gu tribe was greatly restricted at night, so the shaman had no choice but to lure the beast over at this time of the day. The method he used to lure the beast out was just a secret technique of the drumming tribe to increase the hatred in the beast's heart. Once the hatred in its heart multiplied, the beast's caution would no longer be able to hold back its anger and it would lose its rationality. The sound of splashing water grew louder and louder. Even though the trees were blocking their view, the Gu shaman could still guess what was happening by the riverbank from the sound of the splashing water. The first step, lure, was a success. The Gu shaman let out a sigh of relief, but he didn't dare to let his guard down. His eyes were still fixated on the beast, his fingers were trembling. This wasn't something he could control, this step required a lot of energy. Against such a beast, he could only do his best. Boom! A tremor could be heard from the ground. Boom! 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 The trembling grew louder and more urgent. It was on land. Even though the forest on this side of the flaming river was dense, it couldn't compare to the ancient forest on the other side of the river. Due to the tribe's efforts to survive, there weren't many ancient trees here. This kind of forest was an obstacle for the giant beasts. It couldn't even move through the gaps in the forest. The beast's huge body charged forward like an armored car, knocking down all the obstacles in its path and stepping on them. Taking a deep breath, the Gu shaman spat out a word, chase. The voice wasn't loud. Generally speaking, people who were a little far away couldn't hear it at all. But at this time, the warriors of the drumming tribe who were lying in ambush all heard this command. The word chase rang in their minds. Bo Gu hid in the forest and watched as the beast finally showed itself. A drop of sweat rolled down his forehead and his heart pounded. This was the first time he had encountered such a huge beast. He had seen beast horns in Yanjiao's flaming river trading point, but even if they still had traces of the beast's aura, they were still dead. No matter how shocked he was, he didn't panic. And now, they were facing a living, powerful giant dire beast. Don't panic, stay calm, stay calm. Bo Gu's trembling arm quickly calmed down. He drew the bow and released the arrow in one go without any hesitation or doubt. He was as confident and decisive as he used to be when he hunted. The Gu tribe warriors who were hiding in the forest followed suit after Bo Gu's attack. Many of them were still intimidated by the beast, but it didn't matter. This was just the beginning. No matter how hard it was, they had to face it. This beast had been using the smaller beasts to test them. Weren't they using the beast's caution to improve themselves? The small beasts that appeared a few days ago allowed them to get used to it. They now knew how to deal with beasts. They weren't like their ancestors from 1,000 years ago. They didn't have much experience with beasts. If it wasn't for the disaster last year, they would have continued to be isolated from the beasts. But now, they had to face a new environment. This was their first hurdle. Gritting their teeth, the people of the drumming tribe adjusted their totemic power to the peak, trying their best to stimulate all the power in their bodies. Dozens of figures darted through the forest like shooting stars. Every time they moved, there would be arrows aimed at the giant beast that seemed to have cast a solid shield all over its body. Dang! 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 The arrows hit the beast's body and made metallic sounds. The behemoth's slightly long neck seemed to be a flaw, but it was still tightly protected by its armor-like scales, which made it easy for hunters to choose to attack. The stone arrowheads hit the beast's scales. The arrowheads broke and the arrows were blocked. The beast's body was unscathed. At most, there were only some light scratches. The beast shook its head to avoid the arrows aimed at its eyes. Its pupils were sharp and cold like a sword. It looked around with madness and anger. After being angered by the Gu shaman, it looked even more ferocious. Every single scale on its body seemed to exude a thick murderous aura. In its half-opened mouth, its sharp teeth tore apart the tree branches that it was biting. The tree branches became extremely fragile and were easily crushed. With just one move, the people of the Gu tribe knew that there was a huge difference in power between the two sides. If they used the traditional hunting method, it wouldn't be a battle to the death. It wasn't easy to succeed. Chapter 647. A sharp roar like the friction between rocks could be heard. The forest seemed to be pushed outwards by an unintentional hand. The stone arrowheads constantly clanged as they struck the giant beast's body, but the giant beast simply raised its front paw, completely ignoring the dense barrage of sharp stone arrowheads, and pushed down all the trees in its way, venting the anger in its body. Bo Gu realized that the beast's paw wasn't complete. It looked a little deformed, as if it was cut by someone. Yes, it was this paw. Thousands of years ago, when the ancestors of the drumming tribe were hunting this beast, although it escaped, it left behind half of its paw. Now, this beast's paw had healed, but it couldn't grow back completely. Even if it grew back a little, it didn't have the shape of a beast's paw. It looked very strange. This paw, compared to a normal paw, was weaker in terms of agility and attack. Perhaps the giant beast also realized why its paw was like this. It roared angrily again and chased after the people who were hiding in the forest and shooting arrows everywhere. Bo Gu and the others continued to shoot while luring the beast towards the tribe. If it was any other beast, they would chase it from the back. But for this beast, they couldn't stay at the back. They could only continue to lure it from the front. Here, they were the weaker party. The beast was the stronger party. Kacha. 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 A road was opened up in the forest. Broken wood chips and broken leaves scattered. Trees were lifted far away, leaving only some pits on the ground after being lifted up by the roots or remnants of tree trunks that were still in place after being cut in half. This beast wasn't this big 1,000 years ago. It should be about the same size as the small fearsome beasts they met a few days ago. The hunting methods their ancestors used back then were naturally different from now. So, the beast wasn't familiar with the hunting methods the drumming tribe used now. Even if it was 1,000 years ago, it couldn't remember it clearly. Moreover, the probing of the drumming tribe had ended. It believed that the drumming tribe would not pose too much of a threat. Even if it still remembered the grudge from 1,000 years ago, even if there was still a trace of fear in the depths of its heart, but now, all the fear had turned into hatred and anger. Plus, it was angered by the witch. It couldn't think of anything else now. Kill. That was the only thought in its mind. In front, they could already see the drumming tribe's house. Trap. A voice rang in Bo Gu and the others' minds. It was time for the next step. So. Ropes appeared from all directions. Up, down, front, back, left, right, all 6 directions. At the same time, a net suddenly sprung up from under the giant beast's feet. The dust and leaves covering the net were blown away. The moment the giant beast lifted its foot, the net closed and directly bound the beast's claw. The giant beast that was charging forward was suddenly pulled back by the sudden force, but it was only for a moment. The beast swung its claws vigorously, lifting up a forest not far away. The rope from the net was tied to the trees. The warriors of the drumming tribe who were hiding in the forest were exposed as the trees were torn down. They had no choice but to retreat and set up a net in a hurry. The net just now was only one of the nets that had been set up. There were more behind it. One net wouldn't be able to achieve much. They needed more nets. This giant beast had already fallen into their net area. They had to keep circling the ropes around it. The ropes formed a net, and the nets formed a net. One net after another connected to the other. If Xiaofan was here, he would definitely see that this was similar to the chain lasso he set up in the trap. It was just more complicated. If the chain lasso was like changing from one dimension to two dimensions, from beginner to intermediate complexity, then the net was like changing from 2 dimensions to 3 dimensions, from intermediate to advanced complexity. If a person wanted to create a net and ensure its success, as long as they mastered the technique and had enough time and energy, it wasn't too difficult. After all, only one's consciousness was in charge of the operation. But now, the people of the drumming tribe, the 100 or so people in charge of the net, had successfully completed the huge net without any commands. Even if there were conflicts between them, they were now cooperating very well. This was a temporary tacit understanding, which was impossible for other tribes to achieve. In addition, look at the weaved nets. The trees were easily torn apart, but most of the nets were still connected. The ropes were rarely broken. The net wrapped around the beast's feet was faintly red. It wasn't very thick, but it was unusually strong, even if the beast was strong. This was the net after the net ceremony. It was also the net that the drumming tribe used to deal with difficult targets. 1,000 years ago, the ancestors of the drumming tribe often used this net. But in the past 1,000 years, the drumming tribe rarely used it. After all, the fearsome beasts were slowly disappearing, and their daily targets were just some ferocious beasts. There was no need to use this net anymore. Now, after 1,000 years, the drumming tribe was using this net again. More and more nets wrapped around the beast's feet, and more ropes were wrapped around the beast's body. The ropes weren't obvious compared to the beast's size, but they were still increasing. With every step the beast took, more ropes would wrap around it. These troublesome nets and the smell of the ropes reminded it of bad memories from a long time ago. When it thought of its half-chopped claw, it couldn't help but become more irritable. The Gu shaman looked at the giant beast and shouted again, "Capture!" Bo Gu attacked from the back of the beast, his totemic power infused into his arms. The veins on his arms bulged like dragons as he swung his sword down. The sword emitted a suffocating cold light as it landed heavily on the beast's neck. If it was in the past, the beast's head would have been chopped off easily. Even the fearsome beasts from a few days ago couldn't survive this strike. Such a large beast should have been injured by this strike, right? However, when the blade collided with the beast, a sharp screeching sound could be heard. Bo Gu felt his entire arm go numb from the impact. He looked at the area where the blade had touched, only a few scratches could be seen. There was no trace of blood. This strike didn't even cut through the beast's skin. Not only that, Bo Gu could feel that the sword in his hand couldn't be used anymore. There were already cracks on the sword's body. Bo Gu was shocked when he heard this. The other drumming tribesmen who saw this were also shocked. Most of their stone tools were above average, and some were even made from high-quality stones. But this scene told them that their stone tools were useless. Was this a scam? But no matter what, even though they knew their stone tools weren't effective against the beast, they still had to continue with their plan. At the same time, in the flaming river, 2 boats that were supposed to sail downstream were now heading upstream. Chapter 648. In the Gu tribe, there were many nets tied around the beast, but these nets alone were not enough to stop it from moving forward. It was impossible to capture it with these nets. In order to set up more nets, the people of the drumming tribe who were responsible for setting up the nets paid a heavy price. Dozens of people died or were injured. The rest of the people could only hold on and try their best to set up more nets. The number of casualties would only increase. Facing a beast of this level, getting heavily injured was already the best result. The Gu shaman looked at the approaching giant beast, and his calm eyes couldn't help but show signs of worry. Not enough. Still not enough. If he wanted to achieve the desired result, the net that he had set up now was not complete enough. Even if he was prepared, the shaman still underestimated the beast's ability. The people in charge of the nets had already tried their best, so he could not blame them anymore. In the end, it was because they were inexperienced. Facing a beast of this level, although they were not flustered, they were not efficient enough and missed many opportunities. The Gu shaman stared intently at the approaching giant beast, searching it for any signs of life. Was it done? No, there was still a gap. That gap had to be filled, or else it would not achieve its goal. Fill the gap. Two Gu tribe warriors took the chance to attack, each with a rope. However, although they were fast, the giant beast's reaction was faster than theirs. The beast's paw, which was as big as a roof, swept over with a whistling sound. The two of them wanted to dodge, but they found that their escape route had been blocked by the giant beast's other paw. Even if they managed to dodge one of the beast's paws, they would not be able to dodge the other. Without any chance to escape, they were swept away by the paw. Like two meteors, they flew into the forest, leaving a trail of blood in the air. It was too late. The people in charge of the nets were already at their limit. The shaman looked at the approaching beast and could only bring forward the last step. Yes, they didn't have any stronger and sharper weapons to attack. They also didn't have the Flaming Horn tribe's strength that was comparable to fearsome beasts. Their net couldn't trap this giant beast that was already in a frenzy, but they still had one last method. It was the drumming tribe's trump card in case of emergency. Burn. Whoosh, the net around the giant beast suddenly burst into flames. The behemoth's head, neck, torso, limbs, and everywhere where the net rope was tied, flames burst out of it. The flames seemed to originate from the rope net, but the rope net that withstood the flames was not as damaged as the burning firewood. The rope net still maintained its original appearance, but its color was a little redder. Lead, chase, trap, capture, burn, these were the general steps of the drumming tribe's hunting. But most of the time, they would not use the last step, especially after the appearance of the Great River 1,000 years ago, which separated the area where the fearsome beasts lived, so the last step was rarely used. Even if there was a ferocious beast, they didn't need to use the last step to deal with it. Thousands of years ago, when the ancestors of the drumming tribe hunted this ferocious beast, they didn't use the last step. Unfortunately, after 1,000 years, this beast had grown to this level, forcing them to use the last step. Most of the warriors of the drumming tribe had never experienced a situation where they had to use the last step. This was their first time participating in a battle. The ancient fire seed scent filled the area, especially the beast wrapped in the rope net. Other than the fire pit, the ancient fire seed scent was the strongest. The ancient fire seed had a protective effect on the tribesmen, but to the fearsome beasts, it was a natural deterrent. Almost at the same time, the roars of the beasts in the distance all stopped. The only beast that was still standing was the beast that was very close to the fire pit. On the beast's body, even the best stone tools couldn't break through its skin. It was slowly turning black in the flames. This was the power of the ancient fire seed. The scorching pain made the beast stop in its tracks and roar in pain. The shockwave in the air blew the roof off the house. It worked. It worked. Bogu and the others were happy. The heavy stone in their hearts seemed to have been lifted. However, Before they could breathe a sigh of relief, the situation changed again. A ferocious glint appeared in the giant beast's eyes, which were filled with killing intent. It let out another long howl, and the scales all over its body bulged. The air waves that surged out from its body seemed to shoot out from the gaps in its scales, which were difficult to detect with the naked eye. This change only happened in an instant, and a sharp whistle-like sound rang out and then stopped. Bo-gu and the others who were controlling the rope net felt a strong force coming from the vine net. Danger! Just as this thought flashed through their minds, the next moment, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. Blood spurted out from the hand holding the net. Even the bones could be seen. Bang! The sound of the rope breaking could be heard. The first part of the rope that broke was the gap that the shaman thought he couldn't fix. It was as if a chain reaction had started, spreading from the gap to other parts of the net. Bang! 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 The sound of the rope breaking could be heard continuously. The sound of the rope breaking was like a firecracker with a lit fuse. It was so loud that people couldn't focus. The net broke off from the beast's body and flew in all directions. Many of the Gu tribesmen were hit by the net. How? How is this possible? Bo-gu couldn't believe what he was seeing. This beast actually broke free. The Gu tribe's burn technique was known as the ultimate technique. Now, after it was used, its target broke free. Bo-gu and the others were shocked. The beast's cold eyes scanned the surroundings and finally fixed on the figure in front of the fire pit. Bang! The beast's paw smashed into the ground, causing the ground to crack and dust to fly everywhere. With another deafening roar, the giant beast stomped its feet on the ground, ready to charge in that direction with an imposing aura that seemed capable of killing any beast that stood in its way and killing any god that stood in its way. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air was suddenly heard. The beast's head was knocked to the side by the sudden powerful impact, and the momentum that the giant beast had just accumulated was suddenly interrupted. A green spear stabbed into the beast's head. To be exact, it stabbed into the beast's face, below its eyelids and above its mouth. It almost pierced its eyes. The green spear's handle was as thick as an adult's arm. It was made from an unknown tree. The spearhead was a strange green color. Under the hot sun, it shone with a cold luster. Pucci, dark red blood spurted out from the wound. Then, more blood flowed down the spear's handle. Previously, the drumming tribe couldn't break the hide with their stone tools, but this spear did it. The beast's attention was attracted by the spear. Perhaps it didn't expect that it would be injured by a human's weapon. Chapter 649. The giant beast turned its head away from the impact and looked towards the direction where the spear came from instead of the Gu shaman at the fire pit. There was an eagle in the sky over there. The giant beast that was interrupted let out a dissatisfied roar in that direction. But the eagle continued to roar in provocation. It didn't move closer or leave, it just hovered there. The giant beast's throat let out a deep rumbling sound like thunder. It was angry. If it could, it wanted to tear the eagle to pieces, but it could not go up to the sky. The sudden appearance of the spear stunned the Gu tribesmen. They didn't have spears like that in their tribe. If they did, they would have used it long ago. They had seen similar weapons on the Yanjiao tribesmen before. The Yanjiao tribesmen who came to their tribe a few days ago had green weapons like this. Looking at the eagle in the sky, the Yanjiao tribesmen who came a few days ago also had eagles. It's them? The Yanjiao tribesmen? Didn't they leave? Why would they appear here? The Gu tribesmen were only guessing. But the Gu shaman was sure that it was the Yanjiao tribesmen. He could feel the fire seed's energy from the Yanjiao tribesmen hiding in the forest. Although the aura of an outsider made them feel uneasy, fortunately, the other party seemed to be on their side and had helped them. Whoosh! Another spear pierced the giant beast's body, but because the giant beast was now prepared, it dodged and avoided the vital parts. The spear was originally aimed at its eyes, but it pierced its forehead, which was the hardest part of its head. This spear pierced the skin, but it did not bleed because it did not pierce deep enough. The first spear's accuracy was affected by the flying rocks and debris, and the second spear also missed because of the giant beast's defense. But there was no doubt that these two consecutive spears surprised the giant beast and made it very irritable. The skin was broken, the skin was broken. This was the first time the beast had bled since it appeared. The tribesmen who were too close to the beast didn't retreat in time. Now that the beast was distracted, they retreated without hesitation. Bogu's arm was injured because he was too close to the beast. His legs were also fractured and the beast slammed its claws into the ground. He couldn't move freely. He wanted to retreat, but the moment he moved, he couldn't control his body and fell backwards. Before Bogu fell to the ground, a hand grabbed him by the back of his shirt and threw him far away. Bogu was speechless. This was definitely not someone from the Gu tribe. Bogu looked at the person who threw him and his eyes widened. The great elder of Yanjiao? The person who threw Bogu was Xiaofan, but Xiaofan didn't throw it blindly. There were drumming tribesmen in that direction, so they would naturally catch Bogu. Boom! The giant beast's powerful stomps made the already cracked ground even more messy, as if the open wounds were being unscrupulously pulled, making it look even more terrifying. Xiaofan had already leapt backwards to avoid the tremors from the ground even before the beast stomped on him. He used a rope from the drumming tribe to turn his body in the air and moved towards another direction. He couldn't always stay in one place, he had to constantly change his position. He was the one who threw the first spear. He couldn't retrieve the spear from the beast's body as it was too risky. The beast was already prepared and wouldn't let him get close to it. With its size, strength and attacks, one touch from it would be enough to make a person fall to the ground. Xiaofan wasn't confident that he could dodge all of the beast's attacks, so he wasn't in a hurry to retrieve his spear. They didn't have any more bronze spears for them to stab. Luckily, they had already attracted the beast's attention and bought some time for the Gu tribesmen to catch their breath. "Why are you all here?" Bogu asked the nearest flaming horn tribesman as he was led away by his tribesmen. "Our great elder said that you might need our help. That's why we're here." Tua stared at the giant beast without moving his eyes away. "Why would your great elder think so?" "Because he's the great elder." Bogu didn't know how to continue asking. He couldn't guess what the Yanjiao tribesmen were thinking. He didn't know why they would appear here when they had already sailed downstream. However, they were grateful that the Yanjiao tribe was willing to help them. The truth was that the Yanjiao tribesmen wanted to return and see what kind of beast the Gu tribesmen were fighting. They also wanted to understand the Gu tribe's fighting style and fighting style. After that, Xiaofan made a knot and led the others to jump to the bow of the ship, turning back. The shaman looked towards Xiaofan's direction. He didn't have time to thank them, so he made another decision. "Fix it." The Gu tribesmen took a deep breath and started moving again. The battle wasn't over yet. The giant beast had broken through many of the nets, but not all of them. There were still many nets wrapped around its body. However, those nets alone could not be used to their fullest potential. They had to connect all the nets together and fill in the gaps to completely subdue the giant beast. Bogu's position was taken by someone else, so he couldn't fight anymore. He could only watch from the sidelines. "Do you need any help?" Tua asked. "No, thank you for your help. We'll be fine from now on," Bogu said. The Yanjiao tribesmen appeared at the most crucial moment and gave the Gu tribesmen time to breathe. What they needed to do now was to follow the shaman's orders and fix the broken nets. But, would they really succeed? Bogu was anxious. Although they had already set up the nets, they would be more skillful this time. This was the Gu tribesman's talent and Bo Gu didn't doubt it. However, not to mention how many people were injured and their movements were restricted, just looking at the giant beast's current position, Bo Gu's heart couldn't be at ease. It was too close, the beast had already entered the Gu tribe's territory. There wasn't much time left. You really don't need help? Tuo asked again. Actually, they really wanted to help. It was rare to meet such a beast. Although they weren't confident in killing it, they could at least test it out and then run. In the forest, if they met a beast they couldn't defeat, they would do the same thing. Bo Gu shook his head and said firmly, "You guys can't." Although this made Tuo and the others unhappy, they had to admit that in this situation, they couldn't do anything. Firstly, the Gu tribe's fire seed's energy was too strong. The closer they got, the more they would be affected. They would have to use some of their energy to resist the fire seed's repulsion. Facing such a dangerous beast, if they couldn't fight it with all their might, it was better to be careful. Years of hunting experience told them that if they were careless, they could lose their lives. Plus, the beast was attacking the Gu tribe, not the Yanjiao tribe. They didn't need to fight so hard. They could just help from the side. Secondly, looking at the Gu tribesmen's actions, although there were many of them, it felt like they were one entity. If they acted rashly, not only would they not be able to help, they would also interfere with the Gu tribe's plan. Thinking about this, Tuo and the others didn't move forward. They only helped a few injured Gu tribesmen out of the battlefield. They could only help so much. No one could blame the Yanjiao tribesmen. Compared to other tribes, the Yanjiao tribe was already considered kind. For now, they could just watch from the sidelines. Wait, something's not right. Tuo shivered. Their leader, the Great Elder, didn't seem to have returned yet. Chapter 650. Xiaofan remained on the battlefield. It wasn't that Xiaofan was a busybody, he just wanted to help to buy some time for the Gu tribesmen to catch their breaths. Since Bo Gu was injured, he wanted to help as well. Among all the Yanjiao tribesmen here, Xiaofan was the least affected by the Gu tribe's fire seed. That was why he went deeper into the battlefield. When he saw the Gu tribesmen catch their breaths and prepare to fight again, he wanted to retreat from the battlefield. But after a few steps, he heard a voice. Wait! There was no one around Xiaofan. The voice wasn't loud, but it was clear as if someone was talking to him. It was the Gu shaman's voice. It was a secret technique that allowed Xiaofan to stay and help them. Maybe the shaman saw that Xiaofan wasn't affected by the Gu tribe's fire seed. He was also strong. After seeing the two spears, the shaman was sure that only Yanjiao tribesmen could hurt the beast with weapons. The shaman even promised that if Xiaofan helped them this time, the Gu tribesmen would repay the Yanjiao tribe. As for what benefits they would give, the situation was too dangerous for them to discuss. Xiaofan agreed. The shaman would tell Xiaofan when to attack. Front claw. Xiaofan lowered his body abruptly, as if he was sliding on the ground, towards the beast's claw that was propped up on the ground. The beast was looking in another direction. Taking this chance, Xiaofan slashed at the beast's claw. A golden light flashed. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out, followed by an ear-piercing explosion. Shards of scales with a metallic luster broke away from the beast's paw and splashed in all directions. A mark was left on the tough, armor-like beast's skin and scales. As for Xiaofan's hand that was holding the sword, he only felt waves of burning numbness from his wrist to his shoulder. Tough. That was Xiaofan's first thought. He didn't feel it when he threw the spear, but now he felt the recoil from the sword. Xiaofan could feel the beast's strong defense. No matter if it was a strong blow or a sharp blade, it would be greatly weakened when it came into contact with the beast's tough scales. With such a strong defense, even if 200 Yanjiao tribesmen attacked at once, this beast would still be able to hold on for a while. This beast, Xiaoxian's heart skipped a beat. Perhaps it was not obvious just by looking at its size and reaction speed, but he felt that this beast had already surpassed the average fearsome beast. Even the largest fearsome beast they had hunted for the Flaming River Grand Banquet paled in comparison to this beast. Xiaoxian couldn't help but think of the Bat King he met years ago. Back then, the bat was extremely fast. The Flaming Horn hunting team couldn't even catch a glimpse of its shadow. This giant beast in front of them wasn't a speed-type beast. It wasn't agile compared to other fearsome beasts of the same level. It couldn't fly, and it didn't have many other ways to attack. In terms of strength, it might not even be as strong as some of the giant beasts the Flaming Horns had hunted before. However, this giant beast was much stronger than the fearsome beasts the Flaming Horns had hunted before. Perhaps it wasn't as strong as the bat Xiaoxian had met years ago, but it was enough to strike fear into people's hearts. Its defensive capabilities were simply too strong. Generally speaking, an excessively long neck would appear fragile. However, the dense steel armor-like scales protected it tightly. No wonder it was a fearsome beast that had lived for 1,000 years. The Gu shaman didn't know what Xiaoxian was thinking. Even though he was focused on the beast and the Gu tribesmen fixing the net, he still spared a bit of attention to Xiaoxian. He saw the result of Xiaoxian's attack. What a sharp weapon! The Gu shaman's eyes flashed with surprise. He didn't know what material it was made of. Where did the Yanjiao get it? Whether it was the two spears from before or Xiaoxian's weapon, which was completely different from a stone tool, the Gu shaman was shocked. What a monster! But it was a pity. No matter how sharp Yanjiao's weapons were, they couldn't subdue this fearsome beast. Only the Gu tribesmen could do it. The Yanjiao tribesmen could only support them. The skin on the beast's claws was too thick, much thicker than the skin on its face. Even though Xiaoxian's wound was deep enough, it wasn't enough to cause blood to spurt out. It didn't even cause the beast much pain. Compared to the beast's size, a wound like this was nothing. But even so, the beast was still distracted. Its head tilted towards Xiaoxian. After that strike, Xiaoxian dodged to the side without hesitation. In the next moment, the beast raised its paw and stomped down heavily. The stones on the ground were crushed into powder. The ground cracked and caved in. The tremors spread outwards, causing the cracks to widen even further. The original habitat of the drumming tribe had been destroyed beyond recognition after being trampled by the beasts again and again. Outside the battle circle, Guang was holding a strong bow that was almost as tall as her. She aimed an arrow at the giant beast, but she didn't dare to shoot recklessly. She wanted to shoot a few arrows with the other archers, but they soon realized that it wasn't easy to do so. There were people from the drumming tribe everywhere, and they were worried about accidentally injuring them. The Grand Elder told us not to attack for now. We just need to take care of the injured. Kun too looked over worriedly. They weren't worried about the Gu tribe. All they cared about was Xiaoxian. Brother Xian isn't an impulsive person. He knows what he's doing. We just need to watch from the side. If Brother Xian asks us to attack, we'll go over. Guang put down her bow but didn't put the arrow back into the quiver. She was ready to shoot at any given signal. At the battlefield, Xiaoxian once again left a sword mark on the beast's hind leg that wasn't covered by the net under the Gu shaman's instructions. There was some blood this time, but it wasn't enough to cause any real damage to the beast. Xiaoxian wanted to cut a few more times on the same wound to completely cut open the beast's skin, but he didn't have the time and the beast was prepared. Every time the wound appeared, it would close up within a few breaths of time and the blood would stop flowing. Its scales would close up as if it was trying to cover the wound. It was difficult for Xiaoxian to accurately cut the same wound. Plus, he was cooperating with the drumming tribe, he wasn't in charge of the operation. Giving up on the idea of deepening the wound, Xiaofan observed the Gu tribesmen who were busy setting up the net while waiting for the shaman's next instruction. To be honest, if one didn't know how to set up nets, traps, they wouldn't be able to understand their actions. Hundreds of silhouettes shuttled around the beast. The straw ropes were like strange red snakes, intertwining, gathering and forming knots. Then, like a seal, they stuck tightly to the beast's body. If the person fixing the net was slapped away by the beast, the person behind would quickly replace him. The originally messy and incomplete net was broken into whole pieces with the appearance of each net. The broken nets connected, and then flames emerged from the ropes, leaving new burn marks on the giant beast's body. Why did he take the risk to help? Xiaofan actually had his own motives. This was the first time that he had come into close contact with such a huge and complicated net. Hearing about it was one thing, seeing the finished product was another, and seeing the whole process up close was another. The shock that he felt was something that the first two experiences could not achieve. One rope after another, and one net after another. The torn net was being mended. Although their bronze weapons could barely break through the beast's scales, they couldn't do much damage in a short period of time. The only thing holding the beast back was still the Gu tribe's net. This was because the net that had already wrapped around the giant beast was like a seal that had been placed on it, causing the giant beast's movements to become more and more restricted. Xiaofan didn't see the beast rush out from the river bank, but he could guess with his imagination that when the beast first rushed out from the river bank, it was still very fast. Now, it was much slower, as if all the muscles on its body had been burned stiff by the flames on the net. The steel-like scales all over its body had been burned black by the flames. The defense that couldn't be broken by sharp weapons was beginning to collapse under the flames. This was just a broken net, not yet complete. If the Gu tribe's plan was completed, would it be the death of this beast that had lived for thousands of years? A long time ago, when Xiaofan was learning traps from Old Ku had told him about a set of sure kill skills. At that time, Xiaofan thought he had grasped the knack of it, but now, he found that his understanding was too limited. These skills of the Gu tribe were the real sure kill skills that could subdue a ferocious beast. Rather than calling it a sure kill set, it was more accurate to call it a sure kill net. It was a more precise, complicated, and powerful sure kill skill. But the premise was that the net had to be complete. Bang bang bang. The beast stood up, its two front claws reaching for its neck. As it roared in anger, its claws tore the unfinished net off its neck. The Gu tribe warrior controlling the net was also shocked by the vibration of the rope in his hand. The rope fell from his hand, and his body flew out. The broken net of ropes flew down, still carrying with it a flame that had not yet been extinguished. A small section of the rope flew towards Xiaofan. Xiaofan raised his hand to grab the rope. The rope became even redder because of the flames, making a sizzling sound in Xiaofan's hand. The burning pain came. The foreign tribe's fire seed's breath entered his body through his arm. Xiaofan's hand holding the rope was burned. But soon, the repulsion of the foreign tribe's fire seed faded. The rope in Xiaofan's hand was still burning. Although the fire was getting smaller, it still persisted. However, the burning in his hand stopped. It was as if the foreign tribe's fire seed's repulsion towards Xiaofan had stopped. In Xiaofan's mind, the totemic flame was very active when it first came into contact with the rope. It was a natural repulsion and resistance between two fire seeds. But soon, it was the light shield outside that became active. As the light shield lit up, the Yinjiao fire seed in Xiaofan's body and the Gu tribe's fire seed in the rope in his hand both became gentle. It was as if both sides had calmed down. Xiaofan carefully looked at the rope in his hand that was still burning. The red on the rope quickly faded, and the flame also weakened. The red on the rope was blood. Blood and fire came from the same source. With blood as a guide and rope as a medium, he borrowed the power of the fire seed to fight against a stronger enemy. So that was it. Chapter 651. Just as the net was about to be completed, the giant beast tore another hole in the net. This was undoubtedly one disaster after another. Even if the giant beast paid a price for this, with many burns on its claws and even one of its toes burnt off, it was still a heavy blow to the drumming tribe. They didn't have much time left. Although the net they set up was already doing its best to hinder the giant beast's advance, even if the speed was slow, the giant beast still moved forward. The shaman didn't show any signs of panic, but if you looked closely, you would notice a hint of impatience in his eyes. But as the leader of the Gu tribe, he couldn't panic. He was the core of this operation, so he had to act confident. Faster! 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 The shaman roared in his heart, but he wasn't as calm as he looked. Boom! The beast took another step forward, tearing at the net on its neck. Its claws were already injured, and this injury was even worse than Xiaofan's sword. After tearing at the net twice, the beast's stamina was greatly depleted. In terms of stamina, the Gu tribesmen couldn't beat this beast. Its strong defense was its best bet, and now it had the upper hand. If they didn't fix the net in time, the beast would rush to the fire pond. Even if it couldn't destroy the Gu tribe's fire seed, as long as it could injure the shaman or even kill him, it would win this battle. After that, it could even kill all the Gu tribesmen here, and the Gu tribesmen wouldn't be able to resist it anymore. The beast went crazy again. Its claws tore at the ground, and with every strike, the beast would take a big step forward. It didn't care about anything else, just charge forward. Maybe it knew that it didn't need to pay the price of injuring its claws 3 more times to tear at the net. All it needed to do was to charge forward. It rushed to the side of the fire pit, where the aura that it had always feared and hated for 1,000 years was, and killed everyone standing there, as well as the people around it. The shaman's calm face cracked, and he couldn't even maintain his composure anymore. Not enough. Still not enough. It was too late. With his ability to foresee 100 steps ahead, how could he not have foreseen the cruel result that would follow if this progress was to continue? Big drops of sweat rolled down the shaman's forehead, his eyes were bloodshot, and the muscles on his face twitched from clenching his teeth too hard. What should he do? What should he do? Just as the shaman was trying to think of a solution, a voice came. Do we just need to fix that gap? Xiaofan didn't have the Gu shaman's secret voice transmission technique, so he could only shout. The Gu shaman clearly heard Xiaofan's words as the beast's claws stomped on the ground. Although he didn't know why Xiaofan asked, he still answered. Yes. No matter what method you use, what kind of net? Yes. Gu Wu wanted to scream out loud as well. If they could complete the entire net, they would have succeeded. He was also confident that he could burn this giant beast to death here. However, if they couldn't fix the net, they might not be able to kill the beast even if they risked their lives. At that moment, the shaman's mind was filled with the words "complete the web." That was why he answered Xiaofan's question without hesitation. Xiaofan whistled and shouted to Tua and the others who were standing on the other side of the woods, "Throw my bag over here." The flames on the fearsome beast's body skyrocketed and the drumming tribe's fire seed's aura became denser. Even the flaming horns, who were standing outside the battlefield, could clearly feel the unbearable, scorching waves. Hearing Xiaofan's words, Tua and the others didn't know what Xiaofan wanted to do, but they still did as Xiaofan said. Dali threw a bag over. The beast and the Gu tribesmen didn't care about Xiaofan anymore. Xiaofan opened the bag and took out the thing inside. "Xian, what are you doing?" Wei and Tua, who were worried about Xiaofan, were shocked to see Xiaofan cut his arm. "It's okay, don't worry, I won't do anything stupid." Xiaofan's hands moved faster. Wei's heart jumped to his throat when he heard Xiao Xian's words. As the second in command of Ta's advance party, Wei had experienced the consequences of Xiao Xian's "Don't worry, I won't do anything stupid." Grand Elder. Wei's voice trembled. They didn't need to take the risk for the Gu tribe. I know what I'm doing, I'm not doing it blindly. Also, I want to prove something. Don't come near. After that, Xiao Xian carried the things he packed and ran towards the beast. Fix the net, where? Right now, the biggest gap was probably the neck that had just been torn open by the giant beast. Looking at the beast getting closer and closer, Xiao Xian took a deep breath. His fingers suddenly exploded with power. He didn't just increase his strength. Every time he made a move, he calculated it in his mind. 2 palm-sized boomerangs flew out with a thin string, drawing a curved arc in the air and circling around the giant beast's neck. Fortunately, the giant beast didn't care about the string that had circled around it. Xiao Xian bent his knees and jumped up to catch the boomerangs. Then he changed the angle and direction and shot out again. He was fixing the net. As the Gu tribesmen who were familiar with the net, they understood Xiao Xian's actions. They were grateful, but what was the use? If an electric wire was broken somewhere in the middle, it would be fine to connect it with another piece of electric wire, and it would still be electrified. But what if it was a non-conductive wire? Could the wire be connected? That was absolutely impossible. But now, in the eyes of the drumming tribe, even if Xiao Xian had filled in the gaps, whether or not he could form a net, and whether or not the net was strong was another matter. Based on the threads that Xiao Xian took out, it was impossible to succeed. If the Gu tribesmen wanted to kill the beast in one fell swoop, they had to use the Gu tribe's net, and it had to be a ritual net. Only that kind of net could be ignited by the fire seed. Other nets, no matter how good the material was, would not be ignited by the fire seed. Why didn't they give some of the net to the Yanjiao? Many of the Gu tribesmen were filled with regret. The shaman finally understood Xiao Xian's plan, but it was too late. Could he ignite the net too? The shaman couldn't help but feel hopeful. No, impossible, definitely impossible. The shaman immediately rejected that idea. Without the fire seed, how could he ignite the net? The shaman's eyes flashed with determination. Retreat. It was too late, he could only use all his strength to use the fire seed's power to injure the beast. Even if he had to risk his life, he had to stop it. Even if he couldn't kill it, he just had to injure it heavily. If it was heavily injured, the Gu tribesmen would have a higher chance of escaping. If it was heavily injured, the beast would not be able to kill them. This beast alone would not be able to destroy their fire seed. As long as the fire seed was still there, their tribesmen would still have a chance to make a comeback. Without the shaman, they might need to spend more time to train a new one, but as long as there was a chance, it was fine. Hearing the shaman's words, the Gu tribesmen knew what he was planning. Some of them wanted to fight the beast but were stopped by the shaman. If they charged forward, they would be slapped to death by the beast. There was no need for them to sacrifice their lives. The shaman flipped the wooden handle in his hand, the pancake facing down. His other hand held onto the bottom of the pancake was still facing the beast. He was chanting something, preparing for the final attack. Screech, a sharp, metallic sound rang out, piercing everyone's eardrums. It even interrupted the shaman's chanting. The Gu tribesmen who didn't want to leave had to cover their ears. Their faces twisted as they looked towards the source of the sound. They saw the messy threads around the beast's neck changing at an extremely fast speed. They intertwined and tightened. It was as if the messy threads had turned into a sturdy net. The threads flashed red under Yang Guang's hands. Xiao Xian held on to one end of the thread, the other end was already tied into a knot. As Xiao Xian pulled, the other end was pulled closer to the beast's neck. The threads around the beast's neck tightened. The ear-piercing sound was the sound of the silk thread rubbing against the armor-like scales on the beast's neck as it tightened. Seeing Xiaofan's actions, everyone's hearts jumped. What was that Yanjiao trying to do? There was no hope of fixing the net. Even if he could fix it, it wasn't the kind of net the shaman wanted. Even the shaman had given up. Why was that Yanjiao still insisting? Although they thought that Xiaofan's actions were a waste of effort, the drumming tribesmen who saw this scene were really touched. What a good person. The strange movements around its neck made the beast unhappy. It only had eyes for the fire in front of it and the people standing in front of it. Kill them all. Staring at the fire pit, the giant beast did not stop to pull the string around its neck. It continued to rush forward, but when it rushed forward, it swung its neck hard, trying to get rid of the person who was tying the string around its neck. The sudden force pulled Xiaofan up. Because he was still holding onto the thread, it looked like he was flying a kite. Xiaofan was the kite that was being flown up into the sky. The Yanjiao tribesmen were watching nervously. Their eyelids twitched uncontrollably. They didn't know what to do. Xiaofan, who was being carried up into the sky, was calmer than they thought. There seemed to be a voice in his head telling him, yes, this will work. The totemic flames in his mind burned brightly. The fire seed's power in his blood flowed rapidly through his body. His blood was about to ignite. Whoosh! Xiaofan's body was suddenly engulfed in flames. It was as if he was suddenly on fire. The totemic patterns under the flames were clear as day. A strong light turned into a glaring fire dragon. It followed the titan thread from top to bottom, like lightning striking down from the sky, straight towards the beast's neck. Chapter 652. The giant beast, which was originally rushing towards the fire pit and roaring violently, suddenly felt a breath that made it tremble. Before the breath arrived, the scales on its neck seemed to be stimulated and stood up one by one. In the next moment, the scorching flames had already rushed down. When it was caught off guard, the entire neck of the beast was set ablaze. The net wrapped around the giant beast's neck was like a pair of flaming hands, strangling its entire neck. The resounding roar suddenly became intermittent and hoarse, as if it had been burned by sparks. With a strange roar that sounded like rough sand rubbing against each other, the giant beast spat out a mouthful of blood. The witch standing in the front was spurted by the blood. The Guwu stood there covered in blood, his eyes glazed over. Something was wrong. In his own tribe, in his own territory, an outsider used an outsider's fire seed to burn their target. How was this possible? However, the scene in front of him completely overturned his knowledge. At this moment, the body below the giant beast's neck was wrapped in the yellowish flames of the Gu tribe, while the body above the neck was wrapped in the reddish flames. Two different colored flames had actually appeared on the same target. Although the two flames were clearly separated, they did not restrict each other because of the repulsion between the flames. Instead, they each had their own purpose, burning at their own target. This. How was this possible? As the net wrapped around the giant beast's neck started to burn, the rope net that was wrapped around the giant beast's body suddenly changed. The net was still the same, but with the biggest gap at the neck being filled up, it felt more complete. A complete net gave off a completely different aura. The various parts of the net seemed to have merged into one, forming a huge prison net, trapping the target. The giant beast's body stiffened, and even the simple act of lifting its claws became extremely difficult. In Xiaofan's special vision, there were many invisible blue lines of fire all over the Gu tribe. That was the power of the Gu Wu, similar to the power of inheritance. Xiaofan noticed this when he grabbed the rope that fell off. With a different vision, he could see it clearly. The reason why the people of the drumming tribe could cooperate so well was because of the guidance of the invisible blue lines of fire. It was like a giant net that covered the entire area, trapping everything under it. And in the center of this net was the fire pit of the Gu tribe, where the blue lines of fire came from. One of the key factors that caused the rope to burn was the invisible blue lines of fire. Xiao Xian's body also had many invisible lines of fire. However, these lines of fire were not the red of totemic power, nor the blue of inheritance power, but white. These white lines of fire ignited the power of the fire seed in the blood that was smeared on the rope, producing flames similar to the primitive fire seed. Xiao Xian could feel the thread in his hand and the web around the beast's neck. Every part of the flame was like an extension of his meridians. Even the slightest flicker of the flame resonated with his pulse. Crack, 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 with every movement of the giant beast, the sound of something hard cracking could be heard. The sound came from the giant beast's body. Under the tough scales, the wounds on the beast's body were expanding. Every time the beast breathed, it let out a deep roar, like a heavy hammer pounding on its chest, giving off an inexplicable pressure. Not enough. The beast was trying to break free. Xiao Xian's eyes shone brightly as he increased the output of his power. The invisible white lines of fire around his body expanded again, and at the same time, the net around the beast's neck expanded again. Don't just stand there. Xiao Xian shouted, put in more power. The Gu shaman standing in front of the fire pit recovered from his shock. Looking at the flaming beast, he focused his mind and activated the power of the fire seed. He wanted to use the power of the fire seed to give the final blow, but with Xiao Xian's help, he didn't need to risk his life, but it still took a lot of effort. The flames wrapped around the giant beast's body became fiercer and fiercer. The giant beast struggled and let out a painful howl. It wanted to tear off the ropes that trapped its body, but the movement of the beast's claws was like a rusty machine that was hindered more and more. The beast moved its two front claws to its neck, trying to tear the net off like before. But this time, it was more difficult than before. Not only was its movement hindered, even when it touched the rope, it couldn't pull it off. After failing to pull, the giant beast suddenly looked up to the sky and let out an earth-shattering roar. Following this roar, the giant beast's two beastly paws suddenly smashed downwards. Even the front half of its body that was standing upright was forcefully thrown downwards. With this move, the giant beast began its final struggle. The moment the beast's paw smashed down, the entire ground began to shake. It was as if there were giant earth dragons moving underground. Under the cracks in the ground, chunks of earth flew up. The momentum was great, and the earth and mountains shook. In such a large area, stones, wooden stakes dug deep into the ground to build houses, and trees rooted to the ground were all detached from the ground. No one could have imagined that under such circumstances, the giant beast that was trapped by the huge net and burned by the fire seed was still able to unleash such an aura. A strong wind rose from the center of the battlefield, blowing all the onlookers into the sky. Not only was the ground shaking violently, but their minds were also shaken. The moment the air wave hit, those who were slightly closer were momentarily dazed. Due to the beast's movements, Xiao Xian, who had been pulled down by the rope, was lifted up again before he hit the ground. The beast's body was expanding, and a thunderous sound came from its body. Hot air spurted out from under its scales, creating a sharp whistling sound. Pulling out the bones to support the tendons. It wanted to break the net. Charging for the final counterattack. Stubbornly holding on. Xiao Xian could hear the sound of blood flowing in his body. His blood flowed very fast, especially when the flames increased. The blood in his body was like a vast river, gushing non-stop. On the arm that was holding the thread, bulging green veins were pulsating like dragons. His bones emitted crackling sounds, as if they were about to explode in the next moment. At this time, it was a competition of who could last the longest. Finally, after a howl, the beast's head, which had just lifted, was smashed down again unwillingly. Its swollen body seemed to deflate, quickly shrinking and collapsing inwards. The beast's claws gradually slowed down. After an unknown period of time, all of the beast's movements stopped. Even its snorting nostrils disappeared. Chapter 653. The shockwave from the collision weakened. Xiaofan, who had been thrown into the air, finally landed on the beast's back. To prevent the beast from biting him, Xiaofan ran away as soon as he landed on the beast's back. Xiaofan didn't dare to let go of the string in his hand. The flames were still burning. The beast's body was burnt black and the original markings were gone. Some of the scales stuck to the surface of the beast's body were exposed. Steam came out from under the scales and there was also the smell of meat. This should be enough, right? The Gu shaman was the first to stop. He had used up too much energy since the start of the mission. Even if he didn't lose his life, half of it was gone. He looked much older now and his black and white hair was all white. After the shaman stopped, Xiaofan also stopped. The string around the beast's neck continued to burn even after Xiaofan let go of it. When Xiaofan retracted his power, the flames on the beast's neck were all extinguished. "Shaman, how are you?" The Gu tribesmen who could still move rushed over and surrounded the shaman. Those who were too injured to move also looked over worriedly. The Yanjiao tribesmen also rushed over to Xiaofan. "Grand Elder, are you all right?" "I'm all right." Xiaofan sat on the ground and panted. He pointed at the beast not far away. "Go take a look. If it's still breathing, give it a shot." Guang pulled back the bow that was almost as tall as her and shot at a part of the beast's scales that was sticking out of its body. With a whoosh, the green arrowhead pierced through the giant beast's skin and flesh. The entire arrow sank into the giant beast's body. The beast didn't move. Wei threw the stone rope in his hand towards the beast's head. The rope wrapped around the spear and with a strong pull, the spear was pulled out of the beast's head. Actually, when the beast was trying its best to expand, the spears had already loosened. One spear had even fallen off, leaving only one spear on the beast's face. It was the spear that Xiaofan threw at the beginning. Wei pulled the spear back and stabbed it again. When he pulled it out, there were shreds of flesh and blood on the spearhead. "It's not cooked yet," Duo Li said reflexively. The surface of the giant beast's body was indeed scorched, especially the parts close to its scales. Some of them were even burnt like charcoal. A single spear strike could bring up a lot of black residue. But the parts closer to the core were still raw. The blood hadn't dried yet. "Let it bleed," Tuo said. No one objected. Many ferocious beasts had the phenomenon of feigning death. They had once seen a ferocious beast that was being pecked by carnivorous birds in the forest suddenly turn over. Those fearsome beasts only gave up a part of their body. After they escaped death, they would come out of the dead. The rotting parts of their bodies slowly peeled off and regenerated. This beast didn't look like one that could come back from the dead, but it was always better to be careful. Letting out blood was one of the ways to make a beast truly dead. They had used it before when they were hunting. However, this beast wasn't really the Yanjiao's prey. Generally speaking, this was the result of cooperation between the two parties. If they wanted to kill this beast, they had to ask for the other party's opinion. Hearing the Yanjiao's question, the Ji tribesmen agreed in a daze. They didn't have any experience with this. Do we need help?" Bo Gu, who was carried over, asked. He couldn't move, but the other Ji tribesmen could. "No need." Wei waved his hand and pulled out his broadsword. He approached the beast while Tuo and the others stayed on guard. The scales on the beast's neck were more exposed than the rest of its body. Almost all the parts where the net was exposed were exposed. The net made from worm silk broke into small pieces after the fire went out. With just a little pressure, the small pieces would turn into dust. It wasn't just Xiaoxian's worm silk. All the nets made by the Ji tribesmen turned into dust the moment the fire went out. Their mission was completed. Wei followed the burn marks on the beast's neck and made a cut. The scales were exposed, revealing the flesh underneath. It was much easier to cut. With one cut, there was a deep cut. The flesh on both sides of the cut separated, revealing the dark red meat inside. No blood? Bo Gu was shocked. Can't you see it's cooked? Of course there's no blood. Duo Li actually wanted to cut a piece of meat to taste, but he knew it wasn't the time, so he stood aside and continued waiting. This is just the surface. Wei looked at Tuo and saw Tuo nodding. He knew that there was nothing wrong with the cut just now, so he was a little relieved. Once again, he added another cut to the cut made by the previous cut. After 2 cuts, the cut was even deeper. They could even see the blood vessels. Still no blood? One more slash. Still no blood? Again. Bo Gu and the rest were observing the actions of the Yanjiao people. These people were indeed more familiar with fearsome beasts. Bo Gu thought about their attitude when the Yanjiao people came over and felt awkward. He wanted to apologize, but he didn't know how to. He wanted to thank them, but these Yanjiao people were more interested in the beast. They didn't have time to look at anything else. It couldn't be helped. As Yanjiao people who hunted for a living, fearsome beasts were more attractive to the Yanjiao people. Especially when they met a strong and unfamiliar fearsome beast, they paid more attention. Now that the beast was dead, they didn't have time to look at anything else. Wei was sweating profusely. He cut the beast's neck in half, but when he touched the vertebrae, there was still no blood. Because the beast's entire neck was cooked. When the beast's entire neck was cooked, it would be strange if it was still breathing. It was almost the same as chopping off its head. Bo Gu was dumbfounded. The Flaming Horn tribesmen were responsible for the area around the giant beast's neck. They thought the net they set up was a useless one, but who would have thought that the net would be so deadly? It was even more terrifying than the net they set up. After all, the rest of the beast's body was only cooked on the surface. The insides were still the same. Only the beast's neck was completely cooked. Although the neck was thinner, it was only compared to the rest of the beast's body. In terms of depth of burn, the beast's neck was the most serious. He couldn't understand. He still couldn't understand. How was this possible? The shaman who was supported by the others also looked at the beast's neck in shock. The moment the giant beast fell, he had the urge to kneel down and shout in excitement. However, this kind of excitement was stuck when he saw the beast's neck. After staring for a while, the shaman said in disbelief, "It's really cooked." Such a beast, the beast that the Gu tribe's ancestors couldn't even kill when they passed away, the beast that almost destroyed their tribe, was cooked just like that? Until now, his heart still hadn't calmed down. The tension from before was still there. But looking at the beast's corpse, the shaman's heart was filled with complicated emotions. If it wasn't for the Yanjiao people's help, would they have failed this time? I still don't have enough experience. If I had more preparation during the trap and more technique during the capture, the net would have been complete when the burn happened. The shaman thought to himself. If he could have done that, even if the Yanjiao people didn't help, they would have been able to stop the beast. But there was no ifs, there was no going back. A mistake was a mistake, and a failure was a failure. Compared to the ancestors, 1,000 years of experience was fatal. Supported by others, the Gu shaman walked to Xiaoxian and bowed respectfully. "Thank you." The distance from before was gone, replaced by solemnity and seriousness. No matter why the Yanjiao people helped them, they would remember this favor. The Gu tribesmen with lighter injuries were treating the injured. After resting for a while, the shaman was also busy with the rescue. The place was a mess. There were holes and broken rocks everywhere. A little further away, there were all kinds of rocks and broken pieces of wood. The Yanjiao people helped them clear a space for the injured and the dead. Looking at the flaming horn tribesmen throwing rocks that were almost as tall as them and using a thick tree as a broom to clean up the gravel, the drumming tribesmen's faces twitched. The flaming horn tribesmen's strength was indeed well-deserved. Wei chopped some meat and gave it to the Gu tribesmen and the Yanjiao people to replenish their energy. Then, he passed a piece of meat to Xiaofan and sat down on the ground. He sighed, "We have to be careful in the future." As Xiaofan ate the meat, the feeling of exhaustion eased a little. He asked, "Be careful of what?" "Be careful of the beast's revenge," Wei said. Some beasts were narrow-minded and liked to hold grudges. The one the Gu tribesmen encountered was a reminder to the Yanjiao people. That's why, if you can finish it off in one go, don't leave it for the future. No one knows what will happen in the future. The law of the jungle had always been the law of the jungle. No one knew if the weaker side would be able to stand at the top of the food chain in the future. Xiaofan was talking to Wei when he suddenly turned his head to look behind him. When Xiaofan looked over, he didn't see anyone. All he saw was a pile of dirt. This was the center of the battlefield. Because of the giant beasts trampling, there were no large rocks here. There were bulges in the ground, but they couldn't hide people. But just now, someone did come close. Wei's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He raised the knife he just used to cut the meat and was about to rush over, but Xiaofan stopped him. "Come out!" Xiaofan shouted in that direction. There was no movement. "Come out yourself, or die underground," Xiaofan said again. Yanjiao people didn't like being approached from behind. Many beasts that were good at hiding in the forest would use this method to attack people. "No, no, no. I'll come out." 6 words came out in a flash, almost as fast as a person saying 1 or 2 words. If it weren't for Xiaoxian's good hearing, he wouldn't have been able to hear what he said. After he finished speaking, Xiaoxian stared at the place where the ground cracked open. The soil was pushed away, and a human head slowly emerged from the ground. The person's face was full of beard, some of which were thick and stiff. It looked very strange. The beard was covered in dirt, so it was impossible to see what the person looked like. Chapter 654. Who are you? Wei asked with a dark expression. The other person's head shrunk back and he stuttered, "I am from the Ya tribe." Ya tribe? Xiaoxian had heard the drumming tribesmen mention this before. Bo Gu said that the elderly and children of their tribe were all taken away by the Ya tribesmen. The only fire seed he could sense around here was the Ji tribe's fire seed. The Ya tribe should be quite a distance away. But if the Ji tribe could get the Ya tribe to take the elderly and children away, the two tribes must have a good relationship. Xiaoxian signaled Wei to put down his sword and said to the person not far away, "You're here to look for the Ji tribe? Then why did you sneak up behind us?" I'm here, to see the Yanjiao people." The other person stuttered and shrunk his neck. He squinted his eyes and looked at Xiaoxian and Wei. Xiaoxian was speechless. It sounded like he was looking at a chimpanzee in the zoo. At this moment, Bo Gu was carried over. "Hua Ji, why are you here?" Bo Gu's wounds were already treated, but he didn't rest in the cleared area like the others. Instead, he asked someone to carry him here. He wanted to ask the Yanjiao people about hunting fearsome beasts, but he didn't expect to meet the Ya tribe's Hua Ji. "How are they?" Bo Gu thought something happened to the people he brought out, so his tone was urgent. They're fine, they're fine." With Bo Gu's arrival, Hua Ji's nervousness lessened. Although he still spoke quickly, at least he didn't stutter. "I heard that there was no movement here, so I came over to take a look." Knowing that the people were fine, Bo Gu relaxed and introduced the person who suddenly appeared to Xiaoxian. He's Wuxia, from the Ya tribe. The Ya tribe is quite far from our tribe, but they often move around our tribe. After a pause, Bogu hesitated for a moment before continuing. The Ya people live underground and have many underground tunnels. Sometimes, we would ask them to deliver things to us. Previously, when we encountered the giant beast, the elders and children of the tribe were also taken away by them. Even so, he shouldn't have sneaked up on us from behind. I almost stabbed him, Wei said unhappily. Even if he was curious about us Yanzhou people, couldn't he have looked from afar? Do you have to sneak up on me? Cough, you've misunderstood, Bo Gu explained on behalf of Wuxia, the Ya tribesmen, have poor judgment. Xiaofan looked at Wuxia's squinted eyes and nodded in understanding. Previously, when he saw Wuxia's expression, he felt that it was strange. It did not look like he was smiling, but it turned out that he had bad eyesight. Xiaofan from Yanzhou, Xiaofan introduced himself, then looked at Wuxia. Hello, excavator. Wuxia, my name is Wuxia, Wuxia corrected. Wuxia, have the Ya tribesmen ever thought of going to the Flaming River trading point? Xiaofan asked. Flaming River trading point? I've heard of it. I was the one who told Bo Gu and the others about it. Wuxia's long fingernails dug into the ground anxiously. I wanted to go before, but I didn't dare. Why didn't you dare? You know how to dig holes, isn't it safer to go underground? Xiaofan was puzzled. Wuxia's squinted eyes quickly looked up at Xiaofan, then shrunk back. I heard that you Yanzhou people are huge, have sharp teeth and claws, and eat people. Wuxia spoke quickly and bluntly. The words came out of his mouth so fast that Bo Gu could not stop him in time. Xiaofan and Wei were speechless. What the hell? It was fine if he had sharp teeth and claws, but the Yanzhou people would not take the blame for eating people. Bullshit. Who said we eat people? Wei glared angrily. Wuxia continued to dig into the ground. I heard. I didn't say it. Ahem, that, Bo Gu had to explain again. The Ya people heard a lot of news, both real and fake. The people of the Ya tribe dug holes everywhere, and they liked to communicate with each other. When they dug holes in one tribe, they would chat for a while, and when they dug holes in another tribe, they would chat for a while. Then, when their own people gathered together, they would brag and brag. The truth and lies were stacked on top of each other, and when combined with imagination, the truth was distorted a lot. Wuxia also realized that it was not good to talk about this in front of the Yanzhou people. He scratched his messy hair uncomfortably with his long fingernails, then reached into his clothes and dug around. He jumped out of the ground. His short body was exposed, and his neck was short. Xiaofan thought that he was timid and shrunk his neck, but now he realized that Wuxia's neck was short to begin with. When he shrunk his neck, it looked like his head was connected to his shoulders. After jumping out of the ground, Wuxia offered the food in his hand to Xiaofan. Want to eat? Sharing food was one of the ways to show friendliness. It was common among many tribes. This was also Wuxia's way of showing his friendliness to Xiaofan and Wei. If he could be on good terms with the Yanzhou people, he could go back and brag to his brothers. But, Xiaofan looked at the dried worms made from annelids that Wuxia took out. No, thank you. You can eat it yourself. Wuxia asked Xiaofan about the Flaming River trading point, then went to take a closer look at the giant beast. Because of his poor eyesight, or even high myopia, his nose almost touched the beast. After chatting and looking, Wuxia left. He felt uncomfortable under the sun for a long time. Yangguang did not give him a sense of security. On the contrary, if he was exposed to the Yangguang for too long, he would feel uncomfortable all over. The Ya people preferred the dark underground. That way, they felt safer. I'll go underground first. I'll bring your tribesmen back, Wuxia said to Bo Gu, then went underground again. The soil on the surface was quickly tossed up by his two large hands. Soon, Waji's figure disappeared. There must be other holes that they dug nearby. However, the hole under our feet must have collapsed. After Waji left, Bogu said to Xiaoxian, "The people are just a little too curious and timid. They're actually not bad people. To put it bluntly, the people were just a little gossipy and timid. They didn't have much ambition or intelligence to scheme." After settling the injured, the shaman came to Xiaoxian. "You lost quite a lot this time." "Not a single house was left," Xiaoxian said. "No worries. We can just rebuild." This was already the best result at this stage. At least there were still many of them who were still alive. The shaman carefully held a wooden box and passed it to Xiaoxian. "This time, thank you all from Yanjiao." The wooden box was opened. It was filled with crystal balls of all sizes. These were the ones the shaman showed Xiaoxian and the others when they first arrived. They looked like cat's eye stones. But compared to the one the shaman showed them, these were much brighter. On the crystal balls, the eye lines were narrower and clearer. When they turned, they looked like eyes opening and closing. However, these weren't the ones the shaman cared about the most. The shaman removed the top layer of the wooden box, revealing the contents of the bottom layer. The bottom layer of the wooden box was cushioned with soft fur. There were even wooden compartments. Every compartment contained a quail egg-sized bead. There were a total of 9 compartments, 9 beads. At first glance, these 9 beads looked similar to the ones on the top layer. They were just brighter. But when you looked at them again, you realized that wasn't the case. "Look again," the shaman said. Xiaoxian stared at the beads. His eyes widened in shock. "This is..." On the 9 pearls, a clear eye line appeared. However, unlike the bright light on the pearls on the upper layer, on the 9 pearls on the lower layer, a thin line with a darker color first appeared. Then, the thin line opened up, and a slightly lighter filament-like line stretched outwards along the thin line. And as these filament-like lines stretched outwards, the originally dark thin line was like the pupil of a beast, narrowing and widening from its narrowness. It wasn't the usual optical effect produced by the stone under the light, but it was like the eyes of a ferocious beast. When the beast-like eye lines on the crystal opened, Xiaoxian felt a chill as if he was facing a ferocious beast. It was too similar. Those who didn't know would think it was a beast's eye. It wasn't just Xiaoxian. Wei and the others who saw this couldn't help but scratch their arms. A layer of goosebumps appeared on their skin. Luckily, many of them had eaten a beast's eye before. They quickly calmed down from their shock. However, their emotions were stirred up by the shaman's next words. "This is actually called ground eye. No matter if it's the top layer or the bottom layer, they can all be considered ground eye stones. But these 9 beads on the bottom layer are not normal ground eye stones. They are the universal eyes of the ground eye stones." Universal eyes? Xiaoxian didn't understand the meaning of this name. The shaman wasn't in a hurry to explain. Instead, he moved the wooden box left and right. Then, he used his other hand to cover the top of the wooden box. "Can you see it?" the shaman asked. "There, facing the sun." Xiaoxian was shocked. It wasn't obvious when the shaman moved the box, but when he covered the top of the crystal with his hand, the eyes of the beads on the top layer were not obvious due to the light being blocked. However, the 9 beads on the bottom layer were still facing the direction of the sun and opened their eyes. That's right. No matter where the universal eyes are, no matter which direction you stand, no matter how you move the beads, they will always face the sun. Even if they're covered, as long as it's not in absolute darkness, they will always have their eyes open. Not only during the day, they will also have their eyes open at night. But at that time, they won't be facing the sun, but the moon. It said that only 1 out of 10,000 ground eye stones is a universal eye. If it was just a beautiful crystal, Xiaofan wouldn't be too surprised. However, this kind of crystal with a precise direction was very useful. The tribesmen had their own ways of identifying directions. Some relied on crystals to see the position of the sun behind the clouds, some relied on divination, some relied on beast-like intuition, and some directly relied on domesticated animals, such as birds and insects. However, these universal eyes that the shaman took out were the most accurate, least restrictive and most convenient crystals Xiaofan had ever seen. They were comparable to a compass. Chapter 655. These were the real treasures of the Gu shaman. When Xiaofan and the others first arrived, the Gu shaman only took out some normal goods to trick the Yanjiao people. The Gu shaman probably realized this too, so his expression became a little awkward. Xiaofan didn't mind. "I've never seen this kind of stone before." Xiaofan picked up a universal eye and felt its ability to see the sun. "These were given to me by the Jing tribe. I only get one every year. I've been the shaman for 9 years, but I only got these 9 in total," the Gu shaman explained. As for the previous shamans, he could count them with one hand. Their relationship with the Jing tribe only improved after he took over. It was rare for them to get one every year. The previous Gu shamans didn't have such good treatment. "Jing tribe? Is it the tribe you mentioned that is still downstream of you? Are these ground eye stones produced by their tribe?" Xiaofan asked. "That's right. Plus, the Jing tribe rarely uses this kind of stone for trade. Normal ground eye stones might be used occasionally, but the universal eye stone would never be used for trade. However, ordinary ground eye stones had no other uses other than to be used as decorations. To many tribes who were struggling to survive, they were useless. Just like the crystals that the drumming tribe had kept, they couldn't be exchanged for much even if they were used to trade. Seeing that Xiaofan was interested in these universal eyes, the Gu shaman also wanted to change the Yanjiao people's impression of them. After all, because of the giant beast incident, they were too confident and guarded against the Yanjiao people. Their words were obviously trying to chase them away. Now that they were indebted to the Yanjiao people and saw that the Yanjiao people didn't try to rob them, the Gu shaman wanted to improve their relationship. "I don't know how the universal eye is produced. I only know that it's only produced in the Jing tribe. I've never heard of it appearing in other tribes. We have a good relationship with the Jing tribe, and we have helped them many times in the past. The Jing tribe's fishing nets and hunting nets were also exchanged from us. That's why they gave us the ground eye stones and universal eyes," the Gu shaman said. "Then I'll accept it." Xiaofan studied the universal eyes for a while and then passed them to Duo Li and the others. They were also very curious about these universal eyes. When they hunted in the forest, it wasn't sunny every day. Sometimes, the clouds were too thick and there were natural disturbances in the forest, making it difficult for them to determine the correct location and time. At those times, even if they used a sun stone to look at the sky, they might not be able to see the sun behind the clouds. However, if they had the universal eyes, they wouldn't have to worry. They would be able to accurately judge the weather conditions of the storm. They didn't expect to find such good stuff. No wonder the Gu shaman hid all these things. "It looks like a real eye's eye," Duo Li exclaimed. "Indeed, head elder. We can put 2 of them on the beast skulls in the Flaming River Castle." Some of the decorations in the Flaming River Castle were made from the bones of fearsome beasts, but they were just bones. They didn't have eyes, only empty eye sockets. If they put the universal eyes on them and put a layer of skin over the bones, they would look real. But these are too small. It would be nice if we had a bigger one. While the Yanjiao people were discussing, the Gu shaman thought of something and continued to talk to Xiaofan. Actually, the Jing tribe has another type of crystal. It's rarer than the universal eyes, but other than the Jing tribe, no one else has seen it before. Even though I'm close to the Jing shaman, I've never seen it before. When I saw the Jing shaman, he already had an extra eye here. That's more like a real eye than the universal eyes. No, I should say that it's already an eye. Xiaofan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately became serious and sat up straight. An eye? That kind of stone? You can put an eye on it? Yes. I don't know why the Jing tribe calls it the ground eye stone, but I know that every shaman in the Jing tribe will have a special eye. They put it in when they take over the position of shaman. The Gu shaman pointed between his eyebrows. That's why the Jing shaman has an extra eye compared to other people. It's said that because of that eye, the Jing shaman can see things that normal people can't. Seeing that Xiaofan was very interested in the eye, the Gu shaman told him what he knew. Of course, he wasn't an old acquaintance of the Jing tribe. He just felt that the Yanjiao people wouldn't rob them. Plus, the Yanjiao people were rich. They had a lot of food and sturdy tools. If they could be on good terms with the Yanjiao people, the Jing tribe would benefit too. They might even be able to exchange these ground eye stones with the Yanjiao people for food and tools. The Jing people aren't that different from normal people. Only their shaman is different. Of course, before the Jing shaman took over the position of shaman, he only had 2 eyes. To take over the position of the Jing shaman, he must successfully fuse with 1 eye. Only a successful person can take over the position. That's why every generation of shaman has 3 eyes. If no one in that generation can successfully fuse with an eye, they would rather leave the position of shaman empty. They would never allow a 2-eyed shaman to appear. All in all, in the Jing tribe, normal people couldn't become shamans. Only those with 3 eyes could. What are the conditions for fusing with the eye you mentioned? Can non-Jing people use it? Other than humans, can it be used on fearsome beasts? Xiaofan asked a few questions in a row. I'm not sure. The Gu shaman said honestly, although I have a good relationship with the Jing shaman, we rarely talk about his 3rd eye. That's a secret of the Jing tribe. Oh, right. The Gu shaman remembered what was written in his ancestor's notes. According to my ancestor, non-Jing people can't use that eye. People from different tribes had different bloodlines and beliefs, so the totem power in their bodies was different in nature, not to mention the fire seed. The fire seeds of different tribes rejected each other and could not coexist, so it must be the same for people from different tribes. I see. Xiaofan was a little disappointed. There were also people in the tribe who lost their eyes in hunting or war. If they could have a chance to see again, even if they only had 1 eye, it would be a new life for them. Why don't we want to? The Gu shaman sighed. In his ancestors' notes, it said that in the early years, there were people who wanted to find eyes for their family members or close friends who lost their eyes, but they were all rejected by the Jing tribe. The reason they gave was that non-Jing people couldn't use those eyes. Xiaofan thought for a while and asked, if people can't use it, what about fearsome beasts? Fearsome beasts? The Gu shaman didn't expect Xiaofan to continue asking. He knew a little about humans, but as for fearsome beasts, in the past 1,000 years, the people of the Gu tribe had very limited contact with fearsome beasts, not to mention the Jing tribe's eyes. I really don't know. The ancestors' notes didn't mention it. The Gu shaman shook his head. Since he couldn't get an answer from the Gu shaman, Xiaofan decided to ask the Jing tribe himself. Elder Xiaofan, you want to change a fearsome beast's eye? The Gu shaman was very curious about this. Yes, I have a fearsome beast. It's a wolf. It lost an eye during a war with another tribe. Since people can't do it, I want to know if fearsome beasts can use it. I'm not sure if the Jing tribe has an extra eye, Xiaofan said. He had heard that Yanjiao had tamed fearsome beasts, but now that he heard it from Xiaofan himself, the Gu shaman couldn't help but feel envious. However, after this battle, the people of the drumming tribe also gained experience. There were more ferocious beasts on the other side of the river. They would try to hunt or tame them step by step. They would get back the experience they had lost 1,000 years ago and experience the life their ancestors lived 1,000 years ago. The Gu shaman thought about the Yanjiao people's strong physiques. Maybe the Yanjiao people were so strong because they ate fearsome beasts? Oh right, I have a question for Elder Xiaoxian. The Gu shaman hesitated for a while before asking. Go ahead. Why were you able to ignite the rope net back then? If it was that easy to ignite the rope net, many people would have done it a long time ago. It was because it was difficult and there were too many restrictions that made the Gu tribe even more special. Plus, even if he knew how to ignite it, he was in the Gu tribe's territory. He was very close to the Gu tribe's fire pond, but there was no sign of the flames suppressing each other. The Gu shaman still couldn't understand. Even if Xiaoxian was an elder of the Yanjiao tribe, he wasn't a shaman. How could he do this? Actually, I don't know the answer to this question myself. Xiaoxian thought back to the situation back then. It was very mysterious. It was as if there was a voice telling him that he would succeed if he did it. Now that he thought about it, he was too impulsive back then. But at that time, he suddenly had the desire to find out more. Maybe this was why his not divination told him to come back. Xiaoxian also planned to find some time to study it in detail. Maybe it's the protection of our ancestors, Xiaoxian said. The Gu shaman was speechless. Are you fucking kidding me? Why would Yanjiao's ancestors come out of the Gu tribe's territory, right next to the Gu tribe's fire seed? Seeing the Gu shaman's confused face, Xiaoxian laughed. Do you know why I can be Yanjiao's grand elder? The Gu shaman shook his head. Because our ancestors chose me. The Gu shaman stared at Xiaoxian for a while. He realized that Xiaoxian didn't seem to be talking nonsense. He was even more puzzled. Leaving the Gu shaman to continue thinking, Xiaoxian got up to let the people who were free deal with the giant beast. His biggest secret was something that he would never tell anyone else. Xiaoxian and the Gu shaman discussed the distribution of the spoils of war. The Yanjiao tribe took half of the giant beast's scales and meat. If they could help at a critical moment, Xiaoxian would also take half of the meat and scales. The Gu tribe didn't have any objections. In terms of contribution, the Gu tribe had the most, but if it weren't for the Yanjiao people, they didn't know what would have happened to them. This distribution was reasonable. The people of the Flaming Horn tribe only took the scales and meat. The scales were used to make armor. The giant beast's scales were indeed a good material. Even if the edges of the scales were curled up, they could still be hammered flat when the armor was made. As for the meat, they still needed to eat on the ship. This level of fearsome beast meat was enough to keep them hungry. The claws and bones were also left for the Gu tribe. It wasn't easy for them to carry more on the ship. Knowing that Xiaoxian was going to look for the Jing tribe, the Gu shaman even wrote a cloth scroll for Xiaoxian to bring along. He told Xiaoxian to give it to the Jing shaman directly. This way, the Jing tribe wouldn't be too guarded and wouldn't reveal anything. Chapter 656. Originally, the shaman wanted to send a few people who were familiar with the Jing tribe to lead the way for Xiaoxian and the others, but the drumming tribe had just met with a disaster. Most of their houses had collapsed and needed to be rebuilt. It was a huge project, and they needed to take care of the dead and injured as well as their families, so he could only write a letter to Xiaoxian. After Xiaoxian and the others left the drumming tribe, the shaman thought for a while and asked the Yi tribe to send a letter to the Jing tribe. The Yi tribe wouldn't encounter any fearsome beasts when they traveled underground. It was faster and more convenient, so they might be able to reach the Jing tribe before the Yanjiao people. With the Ya tribe in the middle, the Jing tribe's attitude towards the Yanjiao would be better. However, the shaman didn't know that Xiaoxian and the others were even faster than the Ya tribe. The people of the Ya tribe didn't need to cross the mountains to get to the Jing tribe, but not every place was suitable for digging tunnels, especially near the river. Sometimes, they had to take a long detour and rest after walking for a while. Xiaoxian and the others didn't stop to rest other than putting up signs on the shore. They continued to travel day and night. Ever since the giant beast was killed, the river near the drumming tribe became much calmer. Smaller fish started to swim around, and they didn't see any other large and aggressive river beasts. The big fish that Bo Luo encountered before might have been driven away by the giant beast. As they continued to travel down the flaming river, the changes in the terrain weren't too obvious. It was similar to where the drumming tribe was, but compared to the drumming tribe upstream, the forest here was much denser. Xiaoxian sat cross-legged in the cabin with his sword on his lap. There was a trace of blood on the sword. Xiaoxian had used his own blood to smear it on his sword. He thought back to how he ignited the net in the drumming tribe and wanted to see if he could use the same method on his sword. Unfortunately, he never succeeded. He felt like he was missing something, but he couldn't figure out what it was. "There's someone," someone shouted outside. Xiaoxian also noticed the Jing tribe's fire seed, so he put down his sword and walked out of the cabin. "We're here." The Jing tribe also lived by the flaming river. They weren't too close to the river bank, but they weren't too far away either. They were even closer to the river bank than the drumming tribe. The Gu shaman once told Xiaoxian that the Jing people migrated here later on. No one knew where they were before, but after the disaster 1,000 years ago, the Jing tribe moved here. There were people in the forest looking at them. There were also some sharp bird cries. Xiaoxian and the others knew that those weren't bird cries, but signals from people hiding in the forest. As the two ships slowly approached the shore, the people in the forest retreated away from the riverbank, but they still hid in the forest and stared vigilantly at the two ships approaching the shore. They had never seen a boat before, so they were more wary of foreign tribesmen. When the ships approached the shore, they could clearly see a man-made piece of land. There weren't any tall trees there. Other than some short wooden stakes, there was only grass. Even the weeds weren't as tall as the ones in the forest. Those short wooden stakes were probably used to tie down wooden rafts. There were signs of ropes being tied around them. The dents in the grass were obviously stepped on by people. That was why the grass was crooked from standing upright. If people stepped on them often, the grass wouldn't be tall. When they reached the shore, Xiaoxian looked up at the forest in front of him. From the riverbank to the forest, there was a small path. It was only 2 to 3 meters wide, but in the dense forest, this small path was very obvious. The Gu shaman once said that the Jing people would use the drumming tribe's nets to catch fish in the river. They probably used this path to travel between the tribe and the river. Xiaoxian brought his people forward. They didn't go deep into the forest, so they stood still. "Are you from the Jing tribe?" "We're from the Yanjiao tribe. We have something to discuss with you. Please tell the Jing shaman." There were definitely other traps in the forest. Although Xiaoxian wasn't afraid of them, it was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. Plus, he still needed to find eyes from the Jing tribe, so he had to leave a good first impression. After Xiaoxian shouted, the forest was quiet for a while. Then, there were a few bird calls and some rustling sounds not far away. Someone must have left to report. Xiaoxian wasn't in a hurry. He found a rock in the forest and sat down to wait. The others looked around to see if there were any differences between the plants here and upstream of the flaming river. After about 20 minutes, footsteps could be heard from afar. There were also people talking in low voices. There were quite a few people here, no less than 200. It was about the same number of people as Xiaoxian's ship. The crowd got closer and closer. The path was too narrow, so some people walked directly into the forest. The cracking sounds of branches being stepped on became clearer and clearer. Soon, some figures appeared in the forest. Yang Guang's light shone on the forest. Because of the tree branches above, only a part of the light shone on the path. There were even fewer Yang Guang's light in the forest on both sides of the path, so at a glance, the people who could see most clearly were the people walking on the path. There were 3 strong warriors in front. Maybe it was because they were always exposed to the sun, but they looked darker. The drumming tribe's people were already tan, but the Jing tribe's people were even darker than the drumming tribe's people. However, the paintings on their bodies were painted with bright colors. White, red, blue, yellow, green, and so on. The 3 Jing warriors in front held horns, bones, or stone weapons in one hand. In the other hand, they held round shields in front of their chests, covering their entire torso. Only their legs and noses were exposed. Their clear eyes showed unconcealable nervousness. They could probably tell that the Yinjiao people weren't easy to deal with. It would be strange if they didn't take precautions when facing powerful foreign tribesmen. Their shields were made of wood or rattan. After all, they weren't as strong as the Yinjiao people. Shields made from stone or bone weapons were indeed sturdier, but they were too heavy. For people who didn't have the advantage of strength, a heavy shield wouldn't be able to unleash its full potential. Instead, it would become a burden in battle. Looking at the Jing people's equipment, Xiaoxian had a rough idea of their strength. He looked past the 3 warriors and looked at the person behind them. There was a skinny middle-aged man there. His gaze was like a knife. When he looked at Xiaoxian, his gaze was like a sharp blade shooting out from his eyes. It made people shiver. Other than that, the middle-aged man also had the dignified aura of a leader. It was obvious that he was different from the others. The Jing shaman? Xiaoxian remembered what the Gu shaman said. He looked at the middle of the man's eyebrows. There wasn't the 3rd eye the Gu shaman mentioned, but there was a vertical line between the man's eyebrows. It had to be him. Xiaoxian thought to himself. The 3 people in front protected the middle-aged man closely. When they were about 20 meters away from Xiaoxian, they stopped moving forward. It wasn't just them. The other Jing people who came with them were also nervous. They were on guard and uneasy. The middle-aged man raised his hand and gently pushed the 3 warriors in front of him. The 3 warriors hesitated for a moment before they moved aside. However, their gazes were still fixed on Xiaoxian and the others. If Xiaoxian and the others made any strange movements, they would immediately pull the middle-aged man back. The weather was already very hot at this time of the year. The lower reaches of the flaming river seemed to be even hotter than the upper reaches. Because of this, the tribesmen Xiaoxian and the others met on the boat didn't wear much. Most of their skin was exposed under the Yang Guang's eyes. The Xi tribesmen wore linen and ropes as decorations. On the other hand, the Jing tribesmen didn't have such complicated clothing. Most of the warriors who came over were bare-chested. Only their waists and feet were covered. As the distance between the 2 parties got closer, they could see the brightly colored drawings on their bodies more clearly. It wouldn't have mattered if the drawings were other things, but the Jing tribesmen all had eyes on their bodies. The Hui tribesmen liked cloud tattoos, the Xi tribesmen liked net tattoos, and the Jing tribesmen liked eye tattoos. Their tribe's totem looked like 3 vertical eyes. Most of the tattoos on the Jing totem warriors' bodies were eye tattoos, but their drawing skills weren't bad. The different shades of the tattoos were layered, as if there were countless eyes growing on their bodies. The bright colors contrasted against their tan skin, making the existence of these eyes even more obvious. People with trypophobia would feel disgusted and nervous when they saw the Jing tribesmen. They wouldn't be able to look straight at them. They didn't wear much, but they had many accessories on their bodies. There were necklaces on their ears, necks, wrists, waists, and feet. They were all made from ground ice stones. Together with the eyes on their bodies, it made people feel like they were being stared at by countless eyes. It was scary. "Are you Yanjiao tribesman?" the middle-aged man who walked out asked. "That's right." Xiaofan could tell that the Jing tribesman had heard of the Yanjiao tribe before, but he didn't know which version they had heard. Looking at how nervous they were, and thinking about their relationship with the Ji tribe, the version that the Jing tribesman knew was definitely not the real one. Perhaps the short-sighted Yi tribesmen were gossiping too much. "What do you want?" the man asked again. "We just came from the Ji tribe. We have some questions." Xiaofan took out the cloth scroll that the Gu shaman gave him and threw it over. The man caught the cloth scroll and looked at Xiaofan suspiciously. His gaze lingered on the cloth scroll for 2 seconds before he opened it. He was probably checking if there was anything bad on the cloth scroll, such as poison or other traps. However, after seeing what was written on the cloth scroll, the man's tense expression relaxed. "Zhen wrote this?" The Gu shaman's name was Zhen, so after the Jing shaman said this name, Xiaofan nodded. The Gu shaman had already written the general situation on the cloth scroll. After the man read it, he raised his hand to tell the people behind him not to be too nervous. He turned around and said to Xiaofan, "Please." This meant that he agreed to let Xiaofan enter the Jing tribe for a detailed discussion. Xiaofan only brought half of his people with him, leaving the other half to guard the boat. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.